On April 20th, 2013, Nate Diaz faced Josh Thompson in the feature bout of UFC on Fox 7. That event was a welcome party for the flood of talent that joined the UFC in the wake of its acquisition of rival promotion Strikeforce. And alongside Thompson's return to the promotion, the card featured the octagon debuts of such luminaries as Gilbert Melendez, Daniel Cormier, Jorge Masvidal, and Yoel Romero. On that 420 night, back in 2013, Diaz took one of the most lopsided losses of his career, as the mythical creature known as Healthy Josh Thompson made a rare appearance. Thompson's defensive wrestling and powerful kickboxing allowed him to put such a severe beating on Diaz that referee Mike Beltran stopped the fight just as Diaz's brother Nick was poised at the top of the cage with the towel in hand, about to throw. That night is historically noteworthy not for the loss Diaz suffered. After all, his status as one of the most popular fighters in MMA history has never been about being unbeatable, but because it is the last time he was the betting favorite in a fight. In the near decade since then, Diaz has drifted in and out of the sport according to his own whims, fighting 8 times and going 4-4, which is respectable in light of some of those odds. Even by the usual standards of a chronically counted out fighter like Diaz, however, the task that looms in front of him this weekend in Las Vegas is a tall one. After a full year of jockeying and posturing with his promoter, Diaz will fight out what is rumored to be the last bout on his contract against the undefeated Khamzat Chimaev, who currently stands as an almost unthinkable minus 1,600 favorite as of the time of this preview. Will the same guts and screw you attitude that allowed Diaz to upend Conor McGregor or put a brief but mortal scare into now welterweight champ Leon Edwards be enough to score perhaps the biggest upset in UFC history? Only time will tell the answer, but the promotion is banking on the question being intriguing enough to headline a pay-per-view. Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 279, Chimaev vs. Diaz. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com, and back with me after a week or two away is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, it feels good to have you back. How does it feel to be back?
Yeah, it feels great, man. It's you always need that vacation. I went with the family and we did all the sightseeing and all that stuff. But it always feels weird. Like I don't feel connected now to events if I didn't do all this. Like it's weird to not have all this time spending invested in an event that I get to feel like everyone else does. Like how 90% of fans just put on the TV and go. So shout out to Greg. I forgot his last name. I apologize. But when I was on vacation, I met this guy. I actually went to a Buffalo Wild Wings in Williamsburg, Virginia, watching the UFC 278. Mm-hmm. And I met this guy, and he was super awesome. And he trains horse racing, and I actually went to the horse racing. He told me like, oh, I like this horse. This is the one I train. I bet on 4 races. I won 3. I went 3 for 3. Win all 3. Not that show and place and any of that nonsense. Straight up winners. And then the last one, I said, F it. I bet on the 99-1. The horse had like 3 legs or something. I didn't win that one, but I think the lead horse lapped it. But he's super cool, and he was big. He loved Sherdog and everything. He was super cool. He brought my kids and my wife and all of us back to meet the horses and feed them and everything. So it's always cool when you have someone who follows and listens to Sherdog and goes to the page and knows it. So that was super cool. But back to this. Yeah, man, I'm just glad to be back to the regular routine, watching the fights. And in fairness, I kind of had to cram for the final a little bit on this one. I probably didn't do as much research as I normally do. So for those who like to follow picks, as far as a betting advice, I always like to remind people that this is not a betting show. This is strictly us giving predictions. But if you do follow us, follow Ben this week, because he probably did way more research than I did. I still was on a little bit of vacation mode.
But be sure to check out Keith's picks for the local horse track near you.
Yeah. It was at the Colonial Downs racetrack, and it wasn't in Williamsburg. It was just outside of Williamsburg. Beautiful. I've never been to a horse track. I've been to a dog. I've been to greyhound racing. That was my first time doing the horse racing. It was pretty. Not often you get to meet the athletes, So, yeah, it was pretty cool. But before I forget, I wasn't here last week. I did watch the preview. Thank you to Rush Holloway for filling in for me. He did a really really good job. Noah. I'm sorry.
Noah.
I thought it was Holloway's son. No, um, no, he did a really good job. I'm glad he's on the team and everything. So thanks for filling in.
And one final note on the horse races: all of the losing horses are now in Alistair Overeem's freezer. So, it's been a couple weeks. We had the week off after 278. UFC Paris, of course. Noah and I did the preview because you were out of town. So it's been a couple weeks. How does this card overall feel to you as something to come back to? What's your general excitement level for this, and what grade would you give it on paper, knowing that it's a pay-per-view?
Yeah, that's tough. So this is not a good card, man. It'll do good in the pay-per-views. Nate Diaz is going to sell the press conference. He might not show up to a press conference. Like, he'll do something that's noteworthy. You start getting the text, oh, who you like in this fight? Chimaev is I've been promoting this fight for a while. I've been saying during the matchmaking, Diaz needs. I said 2 names. If Diaz's last fight, either you do the trilogy fight with Connor, or you do Chimaev, you build up the next star. It will do good. But when I looked through the card, when I was watching film and everything today, I had to keep reminding myself, this is a pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. If it's missing that, this is it. Oh, I know what happened. We lost that fight. That fight fell apart. And that's why, that's not what happened. We didn't lose Volkanovski versus Josh Emmett. We didn't lose that. We didn't lose John Jones and Stipe. No, this was the plan.
This was the plan all along. One question for you about this one. So the top 3 fights on this card are all welterweight fights, and okay. I generally like when the UFC does that. I understand why, because if somebody falls off the card, somebody vital, there are a lot of moving parts. They have some flexibility. Without tipping your hand as to your actual picks for any of those top 3 fights, we're talking about Khamzat Chimaev, and then there's Nate Diaz, Lingliang, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Holland, and Daniel Rodriguez. My initial reaction is, I think any of those other 4 guys, I might give a better chance to beat Chimaev than I do Diaz.
Taking Lingliang out.
He already beat him. He's already blown Lingliang out, but
yeah. To not give away my pick, but I think anybody's ever heard me tell about Chimaev probably can figure out what my pick's going to be. I definitely agree with the Holland and Rodriguez for sure. Not saying I would pick them over him, but yeah, right. They give him a much, much better chance. What I do like is, while you're talking about this, imagine if something happened in the main event and Kevin Holland got thrown into the main event against Nate Diaz. How fun would that be?
Oh,
not pay-per-view main event fun, but just a general. Or what if something happened to Chimaev if they threw Tony Ferguson in the main event?
Ferguson versus Diaz would be amazing. Again, almost any combination except for Chimaev and Lee, who've already fought, would be a lot of fun. And I understand why it's Chimaev versus Diaz, because, it's likely to pull down at least somewhat respectable pay-per-view numbers. But competitively, you can argue that it's almost the worst pairing they could have done.
Yeah.
But, yeah. We'll get to those fights when we get to them. I just thought that was curious. Any other general thoughts on the card before we dive in?
Yeah, the only thing that we'll talk about it when we get to Ferguson versus Lingliang. Just really weird matchmaking to me.
Okay, yeah, let's make sure to kind of go into that a little bit when we get to that co-main.
Sorry, it just hit me right now. You said Walton. I'm like, holy shit, Tony Ferguson's fighting at 170.
Yeah, this is him moving up to 170.
I just broke down film of those guys fighting each other, and I didn't even hit me. Wait a minute. He was always talking about going down, not going up. But hey, whatever. Maybe the extra water in his brain, maybe it'll help. I don't know.
We head to the welterweight division for a matchup between Darian Weeks and Johan Lainesse. Weeks, the 28-year-old Missouri native, is 5-2 overall. He's 0-2 since joining the UFC out of LFA and several Midwest promotions. He is 0-2. He's run into Brian Barberena and Ian Gary in those two fights. Lost both by unanimous decision. It's a bit of a rough... Yeah, like a rock-solid mid-card veteran and one of the top prospects in the division.
Jesus Christ. Guy joined a Little League, and someone's throwing fastballs at him first day at T-ball practice. Jeez.
Yes, absolutely. And, at the very least, he's made it to hear the final horn against both. He's going to try to get back to his winning ways against Lainesse. The 30-year-old Canadian is 8-1 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC out of Season 5 of Dana White's Contender Series. He ran into Gabe Green in his debut back at UFC on ESPN, Font versus Vera, back in April. Got knocked out late in the second round. So two guys who came to the UFC undefeated and quickly got defeated. One of them presumably is going to get back on track here. The odds makers seem to think it will be Weeks. He is minus 140 right now. Lainesse plus 110 on the comeback. Keith, I'm going to throw this to you first, but when I look at these guys, I see two guys who, Weeks in particular is young, so maybe UFC material at some point, but neither of them really appears to be right now. Tell me if you disagree, if you see more upside than that in either of these guys, and who you think wins.
Yeah, it's still like lower level UFC talents. Like I think they're both UFC talents, but like their ceiling is early prelims guys, or getting thrown in against a guy they're not supposed to fight, like Weeks did on a week's notice against Barberena, or being a showcase for Ian Gary. I don't see these guys ever being ranked fighters. Weeks, he's your wrestle boxer type fighter. He's very unorthodox in his striking. He kind of throws some weird angles. He's constantly moving, herky jerky, bob and weave style. I like that he kind of is he's a little bit of a brawler. Like, I'm going to stand my ground, kind of keep moving forward, high output striker, but he's a minus athlete. He struggled really badly with the speed, with the accuracy of Ian Gary. He does pack some power in his shots. I'll give him that. His left hook is probably his best strike. He stays busy with like teep kicks down the middle, but he doesn't check leg kicks, which is a little concerning. He will shoot for a takedown. He's got some upper body takedowns too, but he needs to really improve the control. He took down Brian Barberena, and he took Ian Gary down. He couldn't hold either one of those guys down. Lainesse, he's really big. That's the first thing I noticed from him. He's big for the weight class. He really wants to work an outside striking game. He really steps into his shots. I like that. He's got big power. He has 6 KOs in his fairly young career. Even in the loss, he dropped Gabe Green in his UFC debut, but he makes some mistakes of really loading up the shots. He throws a lot of haymakers, a lot of overhand shots, which is going to tire him out. He did throw a lot of kicks, which is always good, kicks to the body, but he made some mistakes. He backed straight up. He not only uses pillar defense, but he almost goes to completely like a turtle defense to defend shots, which can work if you're against the fence, against the ropes or in the corner if you're a boxer. But in MMA, you're asking to get just ripped a leg kick or taken down. So he definitely has to change that up. He will wrestle a little bit, but he kind of reaches for takedowns without any setups. He really needs to improve his top control. He doesn't have a single career submission, which is obviously troublesome. But he did in his UFC debut. He almost caught Gabe Green in a guillotine, so that's good. Due to his style, he kind of gasses out. It was like a 1 minute transition from him almost knocking out Gabe Green to him being, blowing his load and super tired and then getting finished because of Gabe Green's output. This is a tight fight. Weeks has a little bit of dog in him. The longer this fight goes on, the more confident I feel in Weeks. However, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go with the power of Lainesse. I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong. I like that he has the power to end the fight. I'm going to say that he lands one of those big power shots before he gasses out. And I'm going to say this time when he knocks the guy out, he's going to finish him. So give me Lainesse by second round TKO.
All right, folks, buckle up. This should be an interesting evening because when I kind of went into my final prep for this show, I suddenly realized that I'm picking a lot of upsets tonight, and not all of them are because I'm stepping way out on a limb. A lot of them are just because I feel like the lines are kind of out of whack. And it starts right here. I'm absolutely with you on the relative strengths and liabilities of these two fighters, but Lainesse has just fought a better slate of competition on his way to the UFC. Like I saw Weeks in his one fight in LFA before he got signed on short notice to the UFC. I forget what duties I had, but I was actually watching that LFA card, and yeah, he knocked out Craig Fairley in the second round, but that was him against a sub 500 fighter. Like he took a 3-4 fighter and made him 3-5 that night. And before that, he had fought at like the smallest of small shows in Missouri and Kansas. You pointed out it's like going from like, like coach pitch or T-ball to like actual little league with like a big kid throwing a serious fastball at you. I always make the comparison of like kind of merging onto that freeway traffic. Like, are you trying to merge into that 80-mile-an-hour traffic on a bike, or are you in a car that like you're actually going to get up to speed? It's been like that for him.
The smart car doesn't look that too smart when the tractor trailer is coming at you. Sorry.
Exactly.
Wait, unless a smart car wants to be the new sponsor of this network, then I'm pumping that car.
Okay, so this prediction brought to you by Smart Car. Lainesse, he fought a pretty good slate of competition, winning 3 or 4 in a row in CFFC, and he might only have been another win away from fighting for the title over there. I think he's looked better, or looked at least as good against a better grade of opponents, Ian Gary aside. And both of these guys have the power to hurt the other badly with 1 or 2 shots. Both of them are defensively porous enough that it's probably going to happen. So I think Lainesse probably knocks out Weeks within the first 2 rounds, but my second most likely outcome is that Weeks knocks out Lainesse within the first 2 rounds. I think it's going to be one of those fights, but like you, I'm leaning towards Lainesse. I think he has a little more power, and again, his own defense and chin are nothing great either, but they're a little more proven. So give me Lainesse by second round TKO here. We head now to the strawweight division for a matchup between the debuting Melissa Martinez and Elise Reed. It is a matchup of the outgoing Combate Americas, now global strawweight champ, and the former CFFC outgoing strawweight champ. Martinez, the 25-year-old Mexican, is a perfect 7-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. As I mentioned, this will be her UFC debut. She last appeared in December of 2019, where she won the inaugural Combate Americas strawweight title in a split decision over Desiree Yanez. She will be facing Reed, the 29-year-old New Jersey native, is 5-2 overall. She is 1-2 since joining the UFC as the outgoing CFFC strawweight champ. She debuted, I believe it was on short notice, against Sajara Eubanks. That was at flyweight. She got knocked out in the first round. Since then, she's 1-1. She took a split decision over Corey McKenna back in March, then came back in May and got knocked out in the third round by Sam Hughes. Odds on this one actually favor the newcomer. Martinez around -160 at most betting outlets. Reed +130. I'll go first here because I have a little bit of inside track. I was there in person at Melissa Martinez's last fight. I was there. That was the Combate Tito versus Alberto fight, down in the Rio Grande Valley back in December of 2019.
I forgot about that.
Dog. And that was the co-main event. Like that was the right before Tito versus Alberto. Martinez, going into it, I was pretty high on her as a prospect. She was super young. I mean, she's 25 now. She turned 25 like last week. She was 21, I think, when I saw her fight. Maybe it was 22. But super young, super raw, but aggressive and with good physical gifts. Like, I thought of her as kind of a strawweight version of that Macy Barber Aspen Ladd mold, where their game hasn't really coalesced yet at age 21 or 22, but just they're strong enough and aggressive enough and have kind of enough of a... Yeah, but that's the word I was coming to. Enough of a instinct, enough of a mean streak. No, you got it. That it was at least carrying them past those low-level opponents. When she ran into Desiree Yanez, I don't throw around the word robbery like very easily at all, especially not since taking the, MMA judge certificate course this past weekend for the Association of Boxing Commissions.
Nice plug.
Nice plug for myself, really. And
you should. Did you get a like a certificate or something?
I should have one coming.
Like you should have one hanging like over you. So anytime me and you are debating like who should have won the decision, you go, well, one of us has this.
It'd be the only diploma on my wall. But I don't throw around the word robbery easily, but it's not even that it was a close split decision. Like Melissa Martinez got her ass kicked. She got her ass kicked, dude. She lost the first and second rounds, and I thought the second was a borderline 10-8. Like,
yeah, I agree with that.
Yanez was like sitting in mount and like punching her out.
See, I thought the first round was really close, could went either way. And I thought, see, I feel like we're one of those ones where if it's one championship scoring, there's no way she wins the fight. But under the worst possible way of 10-8 of the 10-9 system or the 10-point system, I could see a like 2 rounds to 1. Like they're both close. Like it could easily been 30-26 or 29-28 for her. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, again,
But I agree with you. I did give it for Yanez too, just transparency.
But like more important than just like the actual outcome that was called out that night, it showed the limitations of that approach for her. Because once she ran into someone in Yanez that she couldn't just kind of bowl over with a body lock and then like move to mount and punch her out, or couldn't just come forward like swinging like those kind of Macy Barber like wild hooks out and actually catch, she kind of hit a wall. And it's hard for me to imagine. Well, I mean, you point out sometimes that she's at the age where sometimes you disappear for 2 years in this phase and you come back a reinvented fighter. There is a possibility that she has, like, her physical tools have grown. And if she's really been working, if she's really been at the woodshed at, I think she's been at Bone Breakers, either Bone Breakers or Lobo Gym. But if she's really been sharpening her tools, she might be a completely different fighter. But the fighter she was when I saw her fight last, I don't think should be favored over Elise Reed. Part of that might be me overcompensating the other way because I underestimated Reed in her first few UFC fights. I saw this person who came up through CFFC, had been an atomweight for one fight, and then got just bullied and splattered by Sijara Eubanks. But Sijara Eubanks is big. Sijara Eubanks' main problem is her inability to make 125 on a consistent basis. Against women kind of her own size, she's kind of held her own. Like, she beat Corey McKenna. Sam Hughes beat her. She seems to be kind of slotting in as at least just another woman at 115 in the UFC. To me, between these two, it's on Martinez to prove that she belongs at that level rather than Reed, having anything to prove here. If Martinez uses the same approach here, I don't think it's going to work well on Reed. Her fights in CFFC, like the Jasmine Yazdavicius win and the Jillian DeCourcy win, have both aged really well for her. And in particular, going 4+ rounds in winning the CFFC title against Yazdavicius, someone who is big and strong.
Yeah, huge.
Yeah, I think it bodes well. I won't be shocked if Martinez comes out and she is a much evolved or even reinvented fighter, but I'll believe that when I see it. For now, give me Reed to win a decision where Martinez kind of has the same problem she did against Yanez. Like, she will try to initiate takedowns, and in the ensuing scramble, she's the one who ends up on bottom, or she just gets stuck on the feet. And Reed, who actually has pretty good power and is, she's not huge, but she's, decently long reach and uses it well, just kind of frustrates her on the feet. So give me Elise Reed by decision in another upset to open the night here.
Wow. Ben's coming out the gate. Elise Reed, I think you might be a little higher on her than I am. I feel like, you did say she's just kind of like another fighter in the division. That's kind of my view of her. Like, she's not terrible, but she's a high volume striker, very boxing style, uses pressure well, works behind a jab. She did in her last fight, she showed some snap in her shots, which I liked, because I used to say she lacked power because she kind of threw arm punches, and now she's kind of stepping into her shots a little bit. I like, and you mentioned her power. I do. I agree. I think her power is kind of coming along a little bit. And I think some of that might have been fighting up a weight class that she was already undersized. So I think we're in agreement in that. Some defensive flaws. She does keep her chin a little high in the air for me. Due to her boxing style, she's really open to leg kicks. She's a weak offensive wrestler. But she doesn't mind grinding in the clinch though. Like she'll get in the clinch. She likes that grimy thing, but she's not gonna get takedowns, I should say. If she does find herself on top, she has some really good ground and pound. But one thing that really worries me about her, she was almost subbed by Hillary Rose, who isn't a UFC level talent. She's got some weak defensive wrestling. She's terrible getting back to her feet. I mean, her last fight against Sam Hughes, what bothered me was that she showed no urgency late in the fight when she's on the bottom and she's got to lose a decision. Like she wasn't doing anything. Like she was just kind of laying there. So that's a little troublesome. Now, you mentioned Melissa Martinez and having such a big layoff for someone of that age is who knows what kind of improvement she can make. I get that. But the biggest concern to me is setting aside the Giannis fight, she's fought some really low level competition before that. And yeah, I'm with you. I scored it for Giannis, but speaking of that fight, you were there live, so you didn't get to hear the commentary. I just watched it again, and Julian Pena's commentary was terrible. Like she was openly. I'm not even talking about the like skills, who's a skill that some people like this guy. I'm talking about she's openly rooting for Giannis. And like every time Giannis would do something, she's like, "Yeah, keep going. We're like win this position." I'm like, "Are you coaching her? Or are you commentating?" Like it was terrible. Anyways, back to and I actually like you.
Wasn't Masvidal on the?
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, he was commenting. He was high and just chilling, being Masvidal. Like, and this is like 3 years ago. So this is like peak Masvidal.
Oh,
like,
yeah, December 2019. He was the biggest.
In
the sport.
Yeah, he was just chilling. So she's a southpaw. She's got pretty good power, especially with someone who her last fight, I think it was 22. I think she was. So she shows some power. She likes the up jab, which is a nice thing to see. She's got a pretty good overhand left, but she does look for it like way too much. She like wings it, kind of a Dan Henderson, Josh Koscheck type. Oh, look at this new thing I have. Let me keep throwing it. But she needs to improve her takedown defense. I mean, she was taken down by Giannis a couple times. She was mounted by Giannis. She, as you mentioned, the second round, she really struggled to get back up, possibly a 10-8 round. She doesn't have a single submission win on her record, which is troublesome. And she almost, but in fairness, she almost did catch Giannis late in the fight. I think she had, I want to say a guillotine, maybe she might have had on Giannis. I don't remember. I did note that she almost caught a submission. I'm not high on either one. I keep saying to myself, like, I know this fighter isn't good. I don't know if this other one isn't. I usually like taking the young fighter, but what I've seen of Martinez is not good. And again, you said you're a little higher on. Maybe there's some more tools, but Reed is serviceable. And sometimes I'll take serviceable. So we're in the same boat, man. We're going back to back upset picks. So give me Reed by split decision.
There you go. At least as the card is currently ordered, that is 2 upset picks and 2 fights for the extremely like ballsy Shillen and Duffy show this week.
Not as ballsy as my almost 99-1 pick in horse racing. Speaking of, do you think like if this horse racing, like is there like a circuit, like obviously the Kentucky Derby is the highest and Belmont, but is like like I know NASCAR, they go to different tracks, but that's like NASCAR. It is different. Is it like a horse racing circuit?
Yeah, there is.
What is it called? Do we know?
I forget what it's called, but there's different circuits for like the age of the horse. Like there's 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, you know.
But is there like a Bellator circuit where like if a horse starts declining, they still like they just it used to be in that division, we'll take it no matter what. Like Kai Kamaka, sign him. Justin, like who's the Justina Kish of horses? Like is there and then like and because it's Bellator, they just like throw a random donkey in who wants to try horse racing, you know, like I guess or a fast zebra or something.
Well, and they have this whole, a couple of years ago they signed all the fattest horses they could find. Like
it's like
and paid them twice what they were making.
Yeah, the old fat horses versus like the fat zebra or faster donkey who wants to get into horse racing.
Oh man, so horse racing at the Mohegan. Next up at UFC 279 is a men's bantamweight matchup between Chad Anheliger and Alateng Heili. Anheliger, the 35-year-old Canadian, is 12-5 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 5th season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted back in February at UFC Fight Night Walker vs. Hill, where he knocked out Jesse Strader in the second round. It's worth noting that he is 12-5, but that's him going 2-5 in his first 7 fights, a lot of which were at featherweight, then dropping the bantamweight and winning 10 straight fights, which is where he sits right now. So, a little better than his record looks at first glance. He's going to be meeting Alateng, the 30-year-old Mongolian, born Chinese fighter, is 15-8-2 overall. He's 3-1-1 in the UFC. He did win his last time out. It was a 47-second knockout of Kevin Kroom at UFC on ESPN, Luque versus Muhammad 2 back in April. Prior to that, he'd had a unanimous draw against Gustavo Lopez last September. And before that, all the way back in October of 2020, a unanimous decision loss to Casey Kenny. Odds fairly close, but Alateng is a moderate favorite. He is minus 170, and Anheliger plus 140 as the underdog. Keith, who gets it done in this one?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one. Not very high on either guy, to be honest. Alateng Heili is he's a good boxer. He works behind a stiff jab. He's a pretty accurate right hand. He hits hard. I'll give him that. Like his last fight against what's his first name? Kevin Kroom. Like he starched him, which is a nice sign. I'm scrolling through my notes as I accidentally clicked off it. I'm winging my memory off of Alateng Heili. I can't find my notes. Hard leg kicks, but going back to the Casey Kenny fight, that showed me that he'll never be a top guy because he really struggled with the speed of Casey Kenny. He also doesn't check leg kicks. I mean, Kenny murdered him with leg kicks, but he's pretty durable. He can take a beating like that he got from Kenny and just continue to bring it. And I like that he recently started wrestling a little bit. So that, or not, I shouldn't say recently. He's been doing it a while, but he can wrestle a little bit. Like that's not what Chinese fighters are known for. And Anheliger, I like his win over Gafarov on the Contender Series. Like that was a fight that I didn't expect him to win. That was a good win. That impressed me, but it's still really hard. And I know he's on this nice winning streak, but it's hard to get it. Like trust a guy. Like how would you say he is?
35.
35 years old, like kind of new to the UFC.
For those keeping track, he's like 8 weeks younger than Jose Aldo.
He's a controlled pressure striker. He works behind a jab. He does a lot of uppercuts and knees up the middle. Has plus power. He's a weak defensive wrestler, and he makes matters worse by jumping guillotine. But he has a pretty good guillotine, so I'll give him that. He can work back to his feet. On top, he has some strong ground and pound, and he's got great cardio. I mean, the reason why he beat Gafarov is because he was able to press a harder pace. I'm not too high on either guy, but I think they're both kind of gritty guys. So I think this will be a kind of a back and forth fight. I think Alateng is the better wrestler. I also think he hits a little harder. So with a slight edge in both on the feet and the ground, I'll say Heili wins a really close decision.
I was really close to picking my third upset in a row on this one. Like you, I'm not terribly high on either guy. Anheliger, he's obviously been on a nice run. It's tough to win 10 fights in a row in as good a division as bantamweight on any level. And over his last couple fights, he has gradually stepped up to a higher level of competition. Like his, last fight in Canada was against Brady Heaston, who just came in second on our last season of Tough. Muin Gafarov, who definitely was heavily favored to win that one and was one of the sneakily more interesting prospects that season. And Anheliger beat him fair and square, and then outlasting and then blasting Jesse Strader. He's gradually ramped up to the point where I'm ready to concede that he's a guy that'll stick on UFC roster for a while. But yeah, at 35, you can't feel good about that. This is a division that, if you're not Jose Aldo, generally you're well in decline by this point. It's a division where speed kills. Even though he and Alateng Heili are listed as the same height and weight. I have the feeling that Alateng is going to seem like the bigger guy in the cage. Just one of those things where I think he's going to have a little more bulk on him. I wouldn't be surprised if he has the reach advantage, and the kind of clash between his offensive wrestling and Anheliger's defensive wrestling, I think, is what a lot of this fight is going to hinge on. Anheliger has a good gas tank, but if he spent good portions of the first 2 rounds with Alateng getting easy takedowns that don't wear him out and then being able to camp in top position and do a little damage and stay busy, I don't think he's going to be able to bring it into play in a way that turns the outcome of the fight. So give me Alateng Heili in a decision win as well, one where maybe he wins the first 2 rounds and has to hold on in the third. But again, I came close to picking another upset in this one. This is a close fight between 2 guys that, like you, I'm not super high on, but one guy will live to fight on another day in the UFC at least. Next up, we have what is, at least as of the time we record this, the only women's featherweight fight on this card. But given that we have Irene Aldana and Macy Chiasson meeting at bantamweight, we may have 2 featherweight fights by the time things roll into the cage on Saturday night. It is Norma Dumont versus Danyelle Wolf. And
in that number 1 contender matchup. Title eliminator.
Yes.
Title eliminator.
The health of the women's featherweight division is a frequent point of criticism and mockery for both Keith and myself. We're constantly pointing out that almost any decent bantamweight in the UFC women's division could go to featherweight, win 1 fight, and make a case for a title shot against Amanda Nunes. Here's your proof. Because Norma Dumont, she is coming off a loss, but she's arguably 1 win away from being the next title challenger, and she's fighting a 1-0 woman.
If Danyelle Wolf wins, she should get a title shot, because I can see it. Greatest fighter of all time, Amanda Nunes, who, by the way, says that she wants her next fight to be 145, but the greatest fighter of all time, taking on undefeated star, Like
PFL is looking at him and going, "Don't try this. It's not going to work out for you." All right, let's introduce these 2. Norma Dumont, 31-year-old Brazilian, is 7-2 overall. She is 3-2 since joining the UFC. She did lose her last time out. It was a split decision loss to Macy Chiasson at UFC 274 back in May. Prior to that, she had won 3 in a row over Ashley Evans-Smith, Felicia Spencer, and Aspen Ladd. She debuted in the UFC at featherweight. She has tried multiple times to drop to bantamweight. It hasn't really worked out for her. She's blown weight badly twice. She looks to be locked in at 145 for the foreseeable future. Her next test is Wolf. The 38-year-old Pennsylvania native is 1-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. She made her debut back in September of 2020, taking a unanimous decision over Tanisha Tennant at Dana White's Contender Series Season 5, Week 7. You may ask yourself, why is this 1-0 woman fighting a possible title eliminator in her second professional fight? It is, of course, because Wolf is a decorated boxer. She's a 3-time national amateur champ, never turned pro, and she kind of
that's always a good sign.
Well, she kind of waited around for like 6 years to see if the to see if the Olympics would add women's welterweight to the Olympics. They never did. She gave up on waiting and kind of continued training in mixed martial arts. Finally made the turn at age 36. Here she is at 38, making her UFC debut. Quite sensibly, she is not favored to get it done here against Dumont. Dumont's minus 330, Wolf plus 270 on the comeback. Keith, I mean, if nothing else, this is an interesting fight just because of all the unknowns that are out there, but shed some light for us. How did these two match up and who wins?
Yeah, so when I did the Contender Series previews, which she was on it years ago, I kind of forgot about her, to be honest. The most intriguing thing I found about Danyelle Wolf is it looks like she always has eyeliner on. Like, she always looks kind of pretty, even when she's fighting. Like, wow, she's wearing eyeliner. No, those are tattoos. Yeah. She tattooed eyeliner. So that was a good reason to put her on the Contender Series, I guess. Yeah, this fight is it's funny, but it really, when you think about the actual rankings and everything, it holds more weight than any fight on this entire card, including the main event of a pay-per-view card. Think about that for a second. The person making her second professional fight. And then she's going against Dumont, who for a long time, I wasn't on the Dumont train. And then she started picking up wins over people I didn't expect her to beat. And then finally I'm like, wow, she's better than I thought she was. And then as soon as I started believing her, she got beat up by Macy Chiasson. So I have no idea about Norma Dumont. She's a minus athlete, but she's pretty technically skilled striker. I'd say she can fight out of both stands. She likes to switch it up. She's got some quick hands. Works behind a jab. It's more of like a power jab than like a busy jab. She attacks with combinations. Her fade back counters are kind of like her go-tos. I like that she targets the body. She does throw a lot of kicks, which is good, but defensively, she's pretty sound. She uses vision really well. She likes to like parry punches, excuse me, which I've talked about in the past, which I really like. She's not a wrestler, but she will grind in the clinch. She uses her head well, get in the clinch, position, kind of create some space, some framing to land some strikes. She has gotten takedowns in the past, took down Ashley Evans-Smith, took down Felicia Spencer, took down Aspen Ladd, but suddenly in her last fight, like looked like she never took a day of wrestling, and she was getting taken down over and over again by Macy Chiasson. She got taken down 6 times by Macy Chiasson. So, and then when she's been taken down, she really struggles to get back up. So I have no idea. She's so inconsistent. I have no idea what we have in Norma Dumont. Not that long ago, I thought she was possibly the second best featherweight in the world. In the UFC, excuse me, in the UFC. Wolf, she's 38, so that's cool, and she's a boxer, and they're gonna make her sound like she's freaking Clarissa Shields, and she's not. And as far as I know, I think she tried for the Olympics. Like I think she went down in weight, and she didn't make the team.
No, yeah, she tried and
didn't
make it. But
didn't make it.
I mean, they never had her best weight class. 147 is where she would have preferred to be. Yeah.
Okay. No, and that's because she's a very big woman. I mean, I think she's 5'11", 6 feet tall. Like she's big. She's much bigger than Norma Dumont. She's a distance striker. She does, and all this is based on one fight. Just so you know, like when I did the Contenders Series preview, I had to watch boxing matches and she'd done a little grappling. But this is all my information now is off of one fight against Tisha Tennant. She works well from distance. She really understands the striking range. Busy jab. She throws like a double jab, a boxing double jab, which is nice. It's very rare to see in MMA. She throws some clean strikes down the pipe. Her right hand is her best punch. She has some power. She hurt Tennant in the first round of their fight. She throws a lot of long range kicks, but she doesn't check kicks. She didn't like when she was getting pressured by Tennant. She was surprisingly hurt to the body by Tennant. She's very physically strong. You could see the difference in the clinch when she was clinching with Tennant. She did well to not get taken down. But she jumped the guillotine for someone who's a boxer, which is surprising. But she really struggled on the bottom when she was taken down. She couldn't get back up. The round was over. So as far as prediction goes, Wolf is a way better athlete than Dumont. Like I'm not putting it past that Wolf could pull an upset just because she's being, if there's one division in women's MMA that just being a better athlete can win you a fight, this is the one. If this was a decathlon, like I would take her to win. However, this is a fight, so she has no experience. I don't care about boxing. We've seen it with so many people. Yes, I know someone will say, "Oh, Israel Asanya," and other people who come from. Yeah, there's also the Heather Hardys, who is a very decorated boxer who got nose busted open by a high kick by Christina Williams. So I don't even care about the boxing experience, really. What worries me most is a 38-year-old making her second professional fight. We were just talking about Anheliger at 35. This is even worse. It's hard to have confidence. Or I can see Wolf working a distance striking game win, but I can't imagine Dumont doesn't realize that, knowing that's her only victory is to kick and punch from long range. I expect Dumont to crash the pocket, possibly get a takedown. I say she gets some takedowns, get some clinch framing and striking, weighs Wolf down. I think she eventually gets her down, maybe mounts her, tees off from a ground pound. Give me Dumont by third round TKO.
Yeah, most of what you laid down there. I have nothing to add to because it really just reflects my own observations and states them better than I could have. But there is a time when I might have picked Wolf in this. Like, Wolf's appearance on the Contender Series was, it was back in September of 2020, which was right just a few months after Dumont's UFC debut, where she looked absolutely terrible against Megan Anderson. Like, you would expect that Megan Anderson might be able to just bust Dumont up from range, but Megan Anderson took her down, like, moved to mount and, like, punched her out.
Yeah.
And Wolf, she has one fight, but Tanisha Tennant's not a bad fighter. And that's still Tanisha Tennant's only loss, and she's beaten some kind of decent, like, fringe people, like,
that's a good point.
Like, she's not a bad fighter, and Wolf looked pretty good in that fight. However, it's been over 2 years since then. Dumont has improved enormously, and I don't know whether Wolf has, but I'm not betting on it, considering that she, again, as you pointed out, is now 38. Dumont's last performance against Chiasson was concerning. I'm somewhat inclined to chalk it up to an aberration. I mean, Dumont missed weight for that one, and while it's understandable when she misses weight for bantamweight, it was weird to see her miss weight at featherweight and then just kind of look so weak and slow and ineffectual. It does make me wonder if there was some sort of late camp injury or illness that compromised her.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was actually thinking the same thing. Because, like, she stopped takedowns from better wrestlers than Macy Chiasson. Yeah. Sorry.
And the same thing that happened to Chiasson in the fight before that, where she missed weight badly against Raquel Pennington and looked absolutely horrible, and it just came out later that, she had some problems late in camp. Not excusing it, and I'm not saying that healthy Dumont would necessarily have beaten Chiasson, but I was just surprised at how bad she looked.
Yeah.
Assuming that she is back to something resembling the woman who beat Ladd and Spencer, this should be hers for the taking here. She should be able to get inside on Wolf. Her best route to victory does lie with probably getting Wolf to the ground. She wants to be a striker. She has herself announced as a stand-up practitioner, and it's interesting because she sets up in a stance that makes it look like a stand-up practitioner, but then, kind of turns into more of a conventional kickboxer. But in all of her fights, there's multiple times during the fight where I feel like Dumont really wants the fight on the ground. Like, there's something in her that's just a natural grinder.
She's built that way. She's built like what a grinder should be.
I'll be politically correct to say she has a low center of gravity, and and if she goes that route against Wolf, I think this fight is hers to win. I can't imagine Wolf's gas tank or takedown defense are going to be better than they were 2.5 years ago or almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, where's she been too? Like, was this COVID thing? Like, why has she been out? Is she injured? Like, what? Do we know?
I don't know all of it. Like, because by the time she debuted in the UFC in the Contender Series in 2020, like, she had given up on the amateur boxing and Olympic dreams. Like, she kind of trained both from 2016 to 2020. But like, I'm not sure exactly what. But I do know that it wasn't working like hardcore on her MMA skills with a top team.
Okay.
So if Dumont decides to engage in a distance kickboxing match, like, Wolf could make things interesting, but I think Dumont is smart enough not to do that. Give me Norma Dumont just in a really lopsided decision. Up next on the UFC 279 prelims is a heavyweight matchup between Jake, the prototype Collier, and Chris, Beast Boy Barnett. Collier, the 33-year-old Missouri native, is 13-7 overall. He is 5-6 in the UFC, having alternated losses and wins throughout his entire UFC run. He is 2-3 since moving up to heavyweight. If you are watching this on video and you're looking at his Fight Finder photo beneath our heads, you see him there in his original middleweight form. Current Jake Collier is the bad Tinder date of UFC fighters, but he is also one of a very select company to have won bouts in 3 different weight classes. So make of that what you will. Like, he joins like kind of the Kenny Florians of the world in being able to say that.
Do you think Kenny Florian and Jake Collier have anything else in common?
Probably not. Like, I don't know if Jake Collier like watches BattleBots and wishes he could like the play-by-play
You know
guy
what?
for it.
He actually does look like someone who would watch that.
Yeah,
Okay.
probably. His most recent outing was back in April at UFC on ESPN Font versus Vera. He dropped a split decision to Andrei Arlovsky there. Prior to that, he was active back in January, running right over Chase Sherman and choking him out in the first round. He will try to keep the pattern going and get back in the W column against Barnett. The 36-year-old Florida native is 22-8 overall. He is 1-2 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a technical decision that happened in the third round that went the way of Martin Budai. Prior to that, he had, of course, spin-kicked John Volante into retirement and then snatched the mic and ruined the poor guy's, like, farewell to the sport. It was sad and happy all at once. Barnett here is a pretty substantial underdog. Collier is minus 350, Barnett plus 275. I mean, it's easy to make fun of Jake Collier because he went from this like shredded, ripped-looking middleweight to, honestly, just a guy who's put on 80 pounds of fat.
Yeah,
like that's all. But
so pretty much what everybody did since high school. All right.
pretty much what everyone did since high school. Just he's unfortunate that he has a job, where he has to work with his shirt off. If this was like 1996 UFC and he could wear like a t-shirt, he'd be good.
There should be a certain rule. Like, like you hit 250. All right, keep the shirt on. Like,
I'm good with that. But the funny thing is, despite the fact that his body composition has changed, he's still a fairly nimble and light guy on his feet for a heavyweight. He's still like, he looks like he shouldn't have a good gas tank, but his gas tank has not been the problem in his losses. No. And I mean, against Sherman, granted, it's Chase Sherman, but he was surprisingly fast on the ground in moving to take the back, getting the face down rear naked choke on Sherman.
Collier fights like Chase Sherman looks like he could fight.
That is a perfect. Yes, that's the perfect description.
They actually fight. They complete like it's like one of those movies where they switch bodies. Like that 5-year-old kid is in the adult, and they Chase Sherman and Jake Collier change bodies. That's what happened. And
he has one of the same problems that Chase Sherman does, though. He doesn't really have much power for heavyweight. His middleweight power has carried up, and he didn't have a ton of power at middleweight. He's a volume striker without a lot of power in any of the individual punches, and just, a well-rounded heavyweight, pun fully intended. I understand why that makes him a 3.5 to 1 favorite over Barnett, because you and I were both aware of who Barnett was. His highlight reel on the regional scene is inspiring and hilarious. And anyone who is familiar with that highlight reel shouldn't have been surprised by what he brought to the UFC when he joined. The guy is going to throw wheel kicks at people that are 8 or 9 inches taller than him. Everything is spinning. He'll do rolling thunder kicks, axe kicks, everything's spinning. And it's a lot of
Remember that? Sorry, I'm the worst. I apologize. I interrupt you all the time. Remember that guy did that rolling thunder to Ken Shamrock? And that was... Like it was like, hey, it was like Shamrock's retirement fight. Yeah, and like a regional show.
But who was it that did that? It was Jonathan Ivey.
Yeah.
Jonathan Ivey is like the white Chris Barnett, like this little 5'8", 260-pound guy that like rolls all over the place and does crazy stuff.
As soon as he did that, you could tell Ken Shamrock's like, yeah, I gotta retire.
It's like if they even dare to put this guy in the cage, I gotta retire.
Like I was headlining UFC 40 against Tito Ortiz. I fought in UFC 1. Like I wrestled at WrestleMania or a Royal Rumble against The Undertaker or whatever. Like
okay.
There you go. That's my WWF reference. Some guy messaged me that you get a WWF reference. Said I'm a closet WWF fan, so it gets me every time.
The thing about Barnett is his show is a lot of fun while it lasts, but it just doesn't last. Like Collier has a better gas tank than you would expect by looking at him, partially because he's just in better shape than you would think, and partially because he doesn't fight like a maniac. Barnett can say neither of those things, and it cost him against Rothwell. It cost him against Budai. He managed to spin kick Volante to death before it told on him too badly, but it's been figured out. Like, the code's been broken. If Collier has done any tape study at all, he knows what Barnett brings, and he's like, okay, I need to fight sensibly for, 5 or 6 minutes. Then I can really start rolling downhill on this guy. Collier's surprisingly good ground game and his volume-based striking is tailor-made to at least sweep the last 2 rounds off of Barnett or even get a late stoppage against him. Give me the latter. Like, Collier showed some nice killer instinct against Chase Sherman. Give me Jake Collier to get a 3rd-round TKO of a tired and discouraged Beast Boy.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand what you're saying about Barnett saying like it doesn't work anymore, but dude, just do it anyways. Because dude, you're a short fat guy. I mean, like you're like Demetrius Johnson if he just like kept eating pasta every day. Like he should be a flyweight. But he's got good athleticism and he has that like traditional taekwondo style. He's southpaw, so like everything comes from the opposite sides. He throws a lot of kicks. He likes to brawl with like looping haymakers, and he makes a mistake of throwing from the hips. I love that he throws like 40 Superman punches, and I 100% understand why, because he's a shorter guy, and that's the quickest way to close distance, easiest way to close distance. And then he throws those spinning attacks, spinning wheel kicks, and everything. Like, dude, you're not gonna ever be like if you just fought like you probably should, and it would increase your chances of winning. But you still would just get like jabbed from the outside and eventually knocked out anyway. So like do some fun shit. And you had that one moment. Good for you, brother.
He never would have made it to the UFC if not.
Oh yeah, really. That's a good point too. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah. He does. He uses a lot of movement, but he makes mistakes. He moves straight back. Ben Rothwell kept making him pay with uppercuts because he kept ducking his head. He has a wrestling background, but he showed that he has bad takedown defense. He really struggled against the cage against Badai. He struggled to get back to his feet against Rothwell. He doesn't have a submission at all. I mean, he's not a submission at all, threat at all, I should say. Collier, I like how he looks like he should be like the fat guy that just hits hard. And you're right. He's the opposite. He's a high volume heavyweight. Besides the Andre Arlovski fight, because he kind of fell into that Andre Arlovski spell where he can get everyone to slow down their output. But despite that, I went up to MMA decisions, and there was 14 people scored, and all 14 gave the fight to Collier over Arlovski. So if you give him split decision win, and you give him that split decision win over Felipe, he'd be on a 4-fight win streak. He'd be in a much bigger profile fight right now if you're on a 4-fight win streak in the heavyweight division than fighting Mr. Barnett here. As far as his actual skills, he's a high guard boxing style. He keeps everything inside. Nice variety of attacks. Good jab. Throws a lot of combinations. I like that his combinations are high and low, mixing up going to the chin down to the body. Works the body a lot. Those hard kicks to legs, hard kicks to the body. He'll sneak in a high kick. I've been saying this a while on. Despite having a wrestling background, he hardly ever wrestles. But then, as you mentioned against Chase Sherman, suddenly he did wrestle, and his wrestling looked fantastic. Good takedowns, good movement and you mentioned on the ground. He did gas out a little bit against Carlos Felipe, but I think that really is an exception to the rule than what we've seen from him. I think this is an epic mismatch. I see Collier battering Barnett on the feet for about 8 or 9 minutes, being way too fast for him, and I think Barnett like falls from just the output and the pressure. Like I don't think he gets hurt bad. I think he's just gonna be one of these like overwhelming shots. Collier by 2nd round TKO.
There you go. 2 picks for Jake Collier to get back to winning ways. And this is probably the last fight on Barnett's deal. Well, we'll have a talk on the recap.
Straight to Bellator.
They're like, we'll take that, Zebra.
Yeah.
Next up at UFC 279, we have a middleweight matchup between Denis Tiuliulin and Jamie Pickett. This fight was originally scheduled to take place back at the end of June. Keith and I actually recorded a preview for it. We talked off air, and neither of our picks have changed since then. So I'm just going to splice that antique black and white video in right after this. Just please note that I'm not sure what the odds were at the time, but the current line is Pickett minus 140, Tiuliulin plus 110 or so. And I know that Pickett was the favorite back in June. I just don't know what the exact line was, but, keep in mind that whatever I say there is obsolete. Next up on the UFC Vegas 58 main card, and at least as the card is currently structured, this is the fourth fight from the top. Two gentlemen, frankly, in need of a win. Middleweights, Jamie Pickett and Denis Tiuliulin. Pickett, the 33-year-old North Carolina native, is 13-7 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as a 3-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the first, third, and fourth seasons. Finally, after that win on the fourth season in August of 2020, he made his way to the big show where he promptly lost his first 2 fights, came back from that with 2 back-to-back wins, and lost his last time out. That was a first-round Bravo choke submission at the hands of Kyle Dawkins at UFC Fight Night Walker versus Hill back in February. You may remember that from that being the night that Dawkins insisted that we all start calling him the Darce Knight. He'll be taking on Tiuliulin. 34-year-old Russian is 9-6 with 1 no contest overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He debuted in March at UFC on ESPN Blades versus Dawkins, got choked out in the second round by Aliashkab Kizriev. He will try to bounce back from that here. He is not favored to do so. He is a plus 155 underdog. Pickett minus 180 as the favorite. Keith, who you got in this one and how?
I said earlier that there's a guy that I don't have a firm grasp on, and that's Jamie Pickett. He looks good at one fight, looks terrible in another fight. I've said that about him before. One fight he has good output, some other fight he has bad output. One fight he's getting flattened by Jordan Wright. Another fight he's taking power punches for Tefon Nchukwi and battling forward. Pickett, he's a plus athlete. He's fairly fast. Switches stances a lot. He likes being the one march forward. Doesn't really like getting pressured back. He does move away and avoid stuff pretty well, and I'd say he has decent power. I mean, he's a very built guy. You can see that, but he doesn't possess like one punch power. He doesn't have much of a kicking game. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's probably a better opportunistic grappler than he is striker. Like he can get some takedowns, so he's not a strong wrestler. He does like he finds ways to get the fight to the ground. He has good ground and pound, but he doesn't have a submission threat. He doesn't have any submission. I think it's maybe 1 submission on his record. But if he gets taken down, we saw this in his last fight. If he gets taken down, he really struggles to get back up. Now, Julian, he's a very long and lengthy fighter. He's got some pretty quick hands. He works behind a jab. He throws high volume. I like that he gets in the pocket and just throws down. Has like very like wild winging haymaker kind of style where he's trying to end the fight with one single punch every single time. He has been hurt many times in brawls, which I don't like. Being for guys recently in the UFC, he's been tagged a lot. I like his step and knees. I like that he throws hard leg kicks. He works. He likes to work the inside leg kick a lot. He has nice power. He is a good wrestler. He looks to work to a better position when he gets a takedown. Not much of a submission threat. I don't think he has it. I think like Pickett, he may have 1 sub. I don't think he has any. And he has been submitted a few times. As far as my prediction goes, I don't really know. I'm not that high on either guy. I am going to take Julian. He probably has the power advantage. He actually might have the more output, and he definitely. Well, I shouldn't say that definitely is a better wrestler, but like on paper, I think he's a better wrestler. Pickett is a really big guy, so I think people struggle to get it down. But you know what? I'm going to say he rocks Pickett. I'm going to say he lands a big shot. Give me Julian by second round TKO.
Yeah, I mean, I picked Tiuliulin in his UFC debut to upset Kizriev, and I explained at that time that it was a massive flyer. I mean, I think it's probably the biggest odds upset pick either of us has ever picked on this because, Kizriev was like minus 600 or something against him, and I just said, Tiuliulin.
Wait. Did you take Mike Jackson? And he won?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that Jackson was the underdog. Just because it was such an obvious pick for me.
Like, why would he be? Yeah.
Yeah, like, Dean Barry, what? Yeah, but even though Tiuliulin lost that fight and ended up getting choked out, I still felt pretty good about the pick. He's better than his record. He's a big guy with some physical tools, and like he's taking on a guy in Pickett that has the problems that you mentioned. Pickett is big. His last fight that lost to Kyle Dawkins, I should have mentioned that was him turning around on short notice and fighting in like a 195-pound catchweight fight. But certainly he didn't give up any size. And against another guy in Dawkins that's also habitually a 185er, if anything, he benefited more from the 10-pound like allowance. Like he looked bigger, whereas Dawkins just looked more hydrated. I'm with you. Like Pickett is probably the more skilled fighter overall with slightly better physical tools, but he's so inconsistent that I think even as the slight underdog here, Tiuliulin, like he should be able to catch him. Like he's going to be the bigger fighter, at least taller and rangier. I'm picking maybe the heavier guy in the cage, and he's going to put that to good use in the kickboxing. And Pickett is opportunistic when scrambles happen, but he's not a good enough offensive wrestler to just have that as a safety valve if he's getting stuff he doesn't like from Tiuliulin on the feet. So I actually agree with you on this upset pick. Give me Denis Tiuliulin by third round TKO after just kind of frustrating and tiring Pickett out, and just getting the better things on the feet. Next up, we have a featherweight matchup between Hakeem Dawodu and Julian Erosa. Dawodu, the 31-year-old Canadian, is 13-2-1 overall. He is 6-2 since joining the UFC at the dissolution of World Series of Fighting. He's one of the fighters who did not carry on and join PFL, but took that opportunity to move to the UFC. Since then, 6-2 with losses just to Danny Henry in his debut, and then Movsar Evloev last June at UFC 263. Other than that, it's all been wins. His most recent win, a unanimous decision over Mike Trezano back in February at UFC Fight Night Hermanson versus Strickland. He will try to make it 2 in a row against Erosa. The 33-year-old Washington State native is 27-9 overall. He is 5-5 in the UFC across 3 different stints with the promotion. He joined and washed out twice. Since he's been back this most recent time, however, he is 4-1. He got knocked out in the first round by Sung Woo Choi, but aside from that, it's been all wins. He's beaten Sean Woodson, Nate Landwehr, Charles Jourdain, and Steven Peterson. All except the Peterson fight have been TKO or submission wins for him. I will throw out this piece of trivia pretty much every time we talk about Julian Erosa, but he is the first fighter I know of who has joined the UFC 3 different ways: as a graduate of The Ultimate Fighter, as a graduate of Dana White's Contender Series, and then as a COVID-19 late replacement. He is going for his 3rd straight win. He is not favored to do so. He's plus 180 right now. Dawodu around minus 220 or minus 225 on most, on most of your betting outlets. To me, this kind of breaks down to whether we get a Hakeem Dawodu fight or we get a Julian Erosa fight.
Okay. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Hakeem Dawodu, I mean, obviously it's the time-honored kind of laughable cliche to call any muscular black fighter athletic and explosive. It fits Hakeem Dawodu. Dawodu, he looks like a shrunk-down Kevin Randleman. Just, muscles on his muscles, like, huge chest and arms. His thighs are just, he has the thighs of like, an NFL safety or a gymnast or something.
Yeah.
And he is a fast twitch athlete. Like his punches and kicks are blindingly fast. He has power.
Yeah.
His problem is that he's
boring.
too willing to wait.
Yeah.
Yes.
He needs Mark Coleman in the background yelling at him. Yeah. Well, come on, Hakeem.
Breathe. He has the same problem that Randleman did. All the physical tools and oftentimes just would not pull the trigger. Hakeem Dawodu is 6-2 in the UFC. 3 of his 6 wins are by split decision, and the reason is that if he doesn't finish the fight or really hurt his opponent badly, he simply does not throw enough volume to consistently win rounds. He's gotten split decisions over fighters that he is much more skilled and talented than. But, then you flip that over against Movsar Evloev, a guy that you and I both believe is a future title challenger, if not champ in that division, like one of the top prospects. He gave him a good fight. Like, Evloev wasn't ragdolling him. Like, it was competitive. The way that Dawodu will fight up or down to the level of his competition and will just engage in a willfully boring and dull fight if his opponent lets him is the antithesis of Erosa. Because Erosa's whole thing, and again, if you've watched our previews before, I've said this before, he is a kill or be killed guy, and it just seems like all he wants is to make sure that this fight ends up on someone's highlight reel, and he would prefer if it's his, but if he's on his opponent's highlight reel, well, fuck it.
Yeah.
At least somebody got a bonus. That is Julian Erosa.
I love him.
He has all the tools offensively. He is a super kind of glass cannon. He's got power in his strikes, like power in his punches and his kicks. Like he can head kick a dude. He's not a like conventional like lockdown grappler, but in the collisions and scrambles that inevitably results from his fights, he's very opportunistic. He's got super long arms, and he's always the taller guy, so a lot of it works off that front headlock series. You'll see stuff like Darce chokes, Bulldog chokes, where he's just got a dude in the, the Pat Miletich, Carlos Newton, like playground headlock.
Yeah.
He just all you need is to give him a noogie while he's there. That's
Ben, we're old. That's the Ben Askren, Robbie Lawler. We're showing our age. That we both thought that when you said Bulldog, we both thought the same joke. Yeah. And another one happened way more recent.
Yeah, way more recently between, guys that are 40 but not 50. So yeah. If you could assure me, like if you could promise me that Hakeem Dawodu is going to go out and take the fight to Erosa, I've got Dawodu all day. Like he'll find that chin. Erosa's 6'2", like featherweight with his chin straight up in the air, who doesn't always bring his hands back. Dawodu's going to ice this man.
Yeah.
But I have no, I have no confidence that that's what's going to happen. I have the feeling that Dawodu is going to bounce around the outside, throw a kind of one or two sharp low kicks per minute, feints a little bit, throw his jab out there, while Erosa's coming at him and at least throwing volume and throwing head kicks up there. Like, I came into this having watched my tape and just not sure whom I was going to pick. I don't understand why Dawodu is over a 2-1 favorite. Like, how can you be that confident in a guy that literally half his UFC wins are by split decision, where Erosa almost never goes to decision? I'm going with another upset here.
All right.
And I'm not picking Erosa to like head kick Dawodu or get or like snatch a guillotine and tap him out. But I think Erosa's going to have Dawodu in trouble at least once or twice during this fight. And I think even in the round or rounds where he doesn't have him in a lot of trouble, he's going to be more likely to win those rounds on the scorecards by being the guy who comes forward, by being the guy who throws more volume, even if he's not necessarily landing a whole lot more effective stuff than Dawodu is. Just, I can't trust Dawodu to win rounds. So give me Erosa in yet another upset on this card.
Yeah. While you was talking about that, I was thinking about like having how great it'd be to have Dawodu with Mark Coleman yelling in the background. Let's do it more modern. Imagine Dawodu if his coach was Saif Saud. Him doing nothing and Saif Saud just losing his shit for 15 minutes straight, screaming throw punches and stuff.
Oh, I mean, let's get the super team together. Get like Saif Saud and James Krause in the corner. So like if he's getting lazy on the ground, like Krause is just losing his shit and wanting to climb in and like fight himself. And like Saif just yelling at him between rounds. Oh, that'd be beautiful.
Yeah, I was thinking about that time. I think it was Ultimate Fighter 2 where Matt Hughes threw the sponge at Mike Whitehead. I always remember that moment.
And he was so mad because he was losing to Rashad, and he was mad at Rashad for like being the dancing and like show off thing. Like, he was so mad.
Dude, I think honestly, everything you said about this fight is dead on. Like, the more skilled fighter is Dawodu. I mean, Dawodu's a very good striker. He's poised. He moves forward, but he wants to counter strike. Like he moves forward, hoping you throw at him. He fights behind a high guard. He can start so slow because he's so busy setting traps. He fights like he has 15 rounds instead of 15.
That's a great observation.
You know what I mean? Like instead of 15 minutes. Um, he gives away not minutes of rounds, he gives away whole rounds because of his lack of output. But he is setting up attack. He throws a lot of feints, he kind of either trying to freeze his opponent or kind of pull out of attack. He has some of the best calf kicks in the game. Some of the best kicks in general, but especially calf kicks in the game. He's got weak takedown defense. I mean, he's been taken down in 4 straight fights, including 9 times by Musa Evloev. Again, Evloev's a different level guy, but he does well to get back up. So I give him credit to that. Erosa's our kind of guy, dude. He really is. He's huge for the weight cut, long, lengthy, 76-inch reach. He can fight out of both stances, constantly switching stances, constantly moving. He fights with tons of pressure, constantly just on the gas, beating his opponent's volume. I mean, we talk about how like Woodson having these physical. I'm sorry, Dawodu having these physical tools that Erosa doesn't have. We've seen other opponents that Erosa has beaten being the same way. Sean Woodson, Charles Jourdain, he just beat those guys with pressure. Just, I'm going to be on the gas pedal. I know you're better than me, but can you be better than me for all this time fighting at a fight that you normally can't? You can't fight at it because you've never been forced to fight this way. He's insanely tough. He wants to get in the brawl and in the pocket. He's not I disagree on the power. I don't think he's big power. He's not a big cracker, but like he'll tire you out, and then those shots will start hurting you because you're tired. He's got some long range kicks. There's deep kicks up the middle. Has tons of defensive holes. I mean, he's very hittable. You mentioned his chin's high in the air. He lacks head movement. If you actually force him back, he backs straight up. Yeah, I agree with you. He's an underrated offensive wrestler. He has poor defensive wrestling, and he makes it worse because he'll jump on a guillotine. And he'll look so. He's one of these guys though. Like I hate guys who play BJJ, but he's one of these guys. He doesn't take moments off. He's not going to keep you in his guard. He's just going to throw up like crazy attacks nonstop. Chin is obviously an issue. He's been knocked out 5 times in his career, but cardio is an ultimate weapon. He won't stop bringing it. I agree with you, man. This fight should be You know what? This fight should be like one or two things are going to happen. Either Dawodu is going to look like he should have been a negative 800 favorite, or Erosa is going to look like he should be a favorite, but really close, and then he pulls it out at the end. I don't expect any other output than like Erosa looking fantastic in rounds 2 or 3, or Dawodu just destroying this man.
Doing what Sung Woo Choi or Hulu Arce did.
Yeah, exactly. So, man, I'm glad that you went with the upset because I am so torn. And I'm like, am I overthinking this? If Dawodu does not he doesn't have to match Erosa's output. Like he can't match Erosa's output, but he's got to bring it up. He's got to turn up his output some. He can't give away rounds. He's going to have to give away minutes. That's going to happen. But I'm still going with Dawodu. Erosa is so hittable. Dawodu can crack. I think with the leg kicks, I keep thinking this. If Dawodu does his best performance, it's going to be Erosa hopping on one foot because he's got calf kick. He keeps stepping forward, getting calf kicked. I say Erosa is hopping around the octagon, and we get a late stoppage from leg kicks. So give me Dawodu by 3rd round TKO.
There you go. We have that's our first disagreement on the card. And
shame on me for going against one of our guys.
But I
did against Jared Rorschach a couple weeks ago, so I should learn.
And I can absolutely see it going that way, and it's one of those things where we'll know within about 2 minutes. If he doesn't check the first 3 leg kicks and he's got a big lump by like the 3rd minute, like, oh, shit. Next up at UFC 279, and what appears, at least of the time of this recording, to be the main card opener, is a light heavyweight matchup between Johnny Walker and Ivan Cutelaba. Walker, the 30-year-old Brazilian by way of Scotland, by way of Ireland, is 18-7 overall. He is an even 4-4 since joining the UFC out of the first season of Dana White's Contender Series Brazil. He is on a 2-fight losing streak, those being a first-round knockout loss to Jamal Hill back in February, then a unanimous decision loss to Thiago Santos in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 193 last October. He will look to get things back on track against Cutelaba, a man who could use a little positive momentum himself. The 28-year-old Moldovan is 16-7-1 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-6-1 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a quick guillotine choke submission to Ryan Spann at UFC on ESPN, Blachowicz versus Rakic back in May. Prior to that, he had taken a unanimous decision over Devin Clark at UFC Fight Night Smith versus Spann last September. Odds here, fairly close, but Cutelaba is a moderate favorite. He's minus 180, Walker plus 150 or so. Keith, we talked off the top, and you came right out and said, this is not a strong card on paper in terms of divisional relevance. Like, there are a lot of fights that should probably be fun, but if we're asking ourselves, who was the closest to a title shot off a win, as you pointed out, it's probably Norma Dumont, which that's not good. But here...
No, sorry. No, Chimaev is.
No. If they both win, Dumont fights for a title before Chimaev. There's too much stuff happening at 170. We're at least going to get...
Oh, yeah. Who's been losing? Yeah, you're right. Who's been losing? Yeah, you're right.
Like Chimaev would probably fight for a title in his next fight, but he'll probably have to wait 9 months.
Yeah, that's a good point.
This is as rough as it gets. I mean, this should by all means be a fun fight. Something wild is likely to happen, but these two guys each have 1 win in their last 5 fights. This could be a Pickett derby. And you can argue that Johnny Walker should have 0. He's 1-4 in his last 5 fights, and the 1 win should have been a disqualification loss to Ryan Spann.
Or at least a no contest.
But
probably disqualification.
Yeah, I mean...
He punched Ryan Spann in the back of the head like 40 times in a row.
Yeah, it was egregious. And you and I are both guys that we don't...
I hate that rule.
Like, over-calling it.
The reason... I'll tell you why I hate the rule. It's just so hard to call.
Yes.
That's...
Yep.
There's no way around it. I've always said, and I don't know, it should be ear to ear. Like, you have to hit in the ears or in front. Anything behind the ear, that's too hard to tell. You can see ears; they stick out.
Yep.
Make it easier, but I didn't go to the rules and judges forum, the annual meeting like you did.
It was acknowledged at that training that it's one of the...
It's just tough,
harder,
especially with them moving and they're moving their heads and. Yeah.
And they're almost always in super close quarters when it's happening, so the ref has to be in exactly the right position. It's tough, man.
Yeah.
But regardless, I mean, you can make an argument that he should be 0-5 in his last 5, and he'd probably be out of the UFC by now.
And fighting for the Bellator light heavyweight championship or something.
Well, the tough thing about being Johnny Walker is he's gotten almost no break. Who are the losses? Corey Anderson, arguably the best light heavyweight in the world right now. Nikita Krylov. Again, a
underrated
ranked guy.
Yeah.
Thiago Santos, a ranked guy. Jamal Hill, a ranked guy.
Like the next rising guy, yeah.
Yeah. It's the thing is, the problem is Walker landed in the UFC with such a splash. Like his fights were so wild. His personality was just so, like, he's the most Brazilian guy ever. He's smiling, he's dancing, he's doing that like little hip gyration, which because he's so tall, it just means he's gyrating his hips right in the face of the inspector.
He's what Alex Oliveira wants to be.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Walker is like Alex Oliveira's like idol.
Yeah. But every time Alex Oliveira made that little move, like some woman became pregnant, like in the crowd. So like, you got to stop him. And
he's the quagmire, the Brazilian quagmire.
And he cuts such a unique figure visually. I mean, we talk about this guy is one of the biggest. This guy's one of the biggest. No, Johnny Walker, full stop, is the biggest light heavyweight on the planet.
Yeah,
like he's if not the tallest, he's close to the tallest. If not the biggest wingspan, he's close to the biggest wingspan. And I'd be willing to bet that he's the heaviest in the cage on fight night of anybody that fights at light heavyweight in a major promotion. He looks like he weighs 245 pounds in there.
Well, except for William Knight when he misses weight by 20 pounds.
Well, he is a heavyweight. That doesn't count.
Yeah. Like, why didn't he go up to heavyweight? That should work out better for him. He'd be one of the faster guys at the division. Just he's got the frame. He's got it. Just I don't know. He probably had more power. He probably fill out even. Imagine if he did went up to heavyweight and he actually filled out more. and he was walking around at 250, 245. Like, oh my god.
And it might fix at least one of the problems with him. He has numerous problems. One is that he's got that Michel Pereira thing that Michel Pereira has gotten over, where he doesn't throw any conventional offense. He just throws like a assortment of wild spinning attacks and hope something lands. That's one problem that he's never fixed. He is incredibly defensively porous. He is like Corey Anderson, the first guy to beat him in the UFC, just kind of showed it. Corey Anderson was like, I'm not going to engage with this. I'm going to wait. I'm going to stay out of the range of this stuff. And when I catch him with his chin right up in the air, I'm going to flatten him with one punch.
He's like that point guard who just wants to shoot 3-pointers, but they don't want to play defense.
Yeah. He's completely, and everyone is like, oh, stop. You know? Like when it works for a couple of games, everyone's like, he rules. And then when he never stops doing it, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Not getting back on defense. He's launching the three, keeping his hand up until the guy's running down the court.
He hasn't fixed any of those things. His gas tank, I mean, it's not as bad as you might think it would be for a guy that big that burns that kind of energy, but it's not a plus. Like he is in his decision losses to like Santos, to Krylov, he has been the more tired guy by the end of the fight.
Oh yeah, especially against Krylov.
Yeah. So that's against Krylov, a guy that does not have a good gas tank either. Like he's a known quantity, and the problem for me isn't that he's losing, because again, he's still losing to like ranked guys. It's that he's not getting any better. Cutelaba is at least making steps towards getting better. Like, he comes off as a buffoon. The fight with Anheliger will just cement him forever in history as a buffoon. It was so interesting to hear Kevin McDonald tell the story of that, because he was the ref that night from his point of view. But maybe if something really wild happens at these fights, I'll talk about it on the recap.
Yeah, okay.
But quietly, he's become a little more sensible. He's a good wrestler just by virtue of being as strong and as athletic as he is, and he's been willing to embrace that a little more.
A little bit, yeah.
He's managed his gas tank a little better. Like, he's still kind of a glass cannon himself, but not nearly to the extent that Walker is. Because of that, I have no faith that Walker's any better a fighter. Cutelaba, it's wild that he's still just 28 years old. He's been in the UFC long enough, and he's had enough memorable fights that I keep on expecting him to be, at least over 30. Like, this one, just, again, tailor-made for Cutelaba. I don't think he's going to walk right into a head kick or a spinning back elbow from Walker. I think he's probably going to take this as more or less a conventional kickboxing match. I don't think he's going to bite on Walker's weird stuff. And I think if he's willing to turn to wrestling, he can get takedowns on a guy in Walker that is all legs. And even if he doesn't make too much headway there, I think those are moments that will make Walker tired faster than Cutelaba. So give me Cutelaba by a late TKO, either by accumulation of damage or by exhaustion, but Cutelaba TKO round 3.
You said Cutelaba is like a buffoon, but you know what? When he paid himself with the Incredible Hulk, that still was one of the. I don't care what anybody says. Like, that was awesome.
Oh, no, dude,
because he had the body for it. Yeah,
I'm not saying it as an insult. Like,
oh yeah.
He's just, he's not half the fighter.
I just imagine. Good.
Put Paul Craig or Gerald Meerschaert's brain into that body, and you've got a champ.
Oh yeah. Well, Paul Craig's got a couple screws loose too. Man, I agree with Meerschaert or something. Yeah. James Krause's brain in his body. Yeah. It's just I can't wait to like the stare downs. Like
to stare up.
No. Like Cutelaba, like all crazy and intense. Like, imagine Cutelaba paints himself. I know he hasn't done it forever, but if he painted himself again, and like Johnny Walker just smiling and cheesing, it'd be like when you're at like Times Square and the people are dressed up as characters, you take a picture with them, and like you take a picture of the bad guy, and he's got to look all mean, and then like the kid is like, yeah. Like, that'd be Cutelaba and Johnny Walker's stare down.
And Cutelaba's the kind of guy that would get like legitimately mad at Walker.
Yeah, push him and shit. Yeah. And as you mentioned, Walker's like this huge dude, massive dude. He's a great athlete, tons of fun when he's doing all these explosive movements, huge power, spinning attacks and flying knees. You mentioned it. He's not much of a wrestler. When he's trying to stop takedowns, his best defense has been that Travis Brown elbows things that he did to Ryan Spann, which obviously is effective for his size. If he gets on top, he has these like clubbing long arms, so he has some good ground and pound. Kind of blast right through the guard, but he's a really weak defensive wrestler. And as you mentioned, and I know I'm just repeating what you're saying. I'm just worried about his chin. Even that's the thing about Johnny Walker. Even the way he gets knocked out has to be like over the top. The way he gets knocked out, like that knockout where he's like tossing both. Yeah. It was like something like you'd see. Oh, yeah. You know what I was gonna say, so I'm just gonna skip. I don't want to say it looked like someone got hit with a steel chair in WWF.
Well,
that's three. It got me three times.
Shamrock, because Ken Shamrock is like the all-time leader in just taking brutal chair shots. So yeah.
Oh, that explains a lot.
Well, I mean, honestly, it kind of does.
Yeah.
Like, he absolutely has CTE from chair shots, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Corey Anderson blasted him. And then you mentioned he kind of gassed out against Krylov. And the Santos fight, he was more tired, but that fight was like a really slow paced fight. That's like the one time.
Santos fight.
Yeah, that was also like the one time he didn't go nuts. Cutelaba, as you mentioned, he's a wrestling boxer. He throws short, hard shots, but he can often overthrow, like almost knock himself over with the shots he throws. But if he gets inside and he unloads big shots, he's got the power. His left hook is his best strike. He hits really hard, but he loads up on everything. He telegraphs himself. He really doesn't pace himself. I do agree with you saying he has slowed it down a little bit, and that's because he started wrestling. His wrestling cardio is better than his like striking cardio, which is usually the opposite for most people. In the past, I would complain that he didn't wrestle much. Well, he got 8 takedowns against Devin Clark, who's known for his wrestling, and 9 against Dustin Jacoby. So now he's one to grind in the clinch. And so this fight is aggravating because I don't have a clue who's going to win. Like, I give Johnny Walker more of a chance because if Cutelaba fights stupid, gets in that wild haymaking thing, I could see him eating a knee, a flying knee, or something. But he could also land one little short, big shot himself, or he can wrestle too. I like that wrestling's become a big option in his game. I don't like it watching wise. Like, crazy Cutelaba is better, but I mean, if I'm coaching him, I would like that best. So because Cutelaba has more options to win, I'm going to go with Cutelaba by decision, due strictly from wrestling.
We head now to the women's bantamweight division. Knock on wood, fingers crossed, so we hope, as Irene Aldana meets Macy Chiasson. Aldana, the 34-year-old Mexican, is 13-6 overall. She is 6-4 since joining the UFC as a former Invicta FC title challenger. She won her last time out. It was a first-round TKO over Yana Kunitskaya last July at UFC 264. That got her back on the winning track after a unanimous decision loss to Holly Holm in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 16 back in October of 2020. She'll be taking on Chiasson, the 31-year-old Louisiana native fighting out of Fort Worth, Texas, is 8-2 overall. She is 5-2 since joining the UFC as the featherweight winner of The Ultimate Fighter Season 28. She is 4-1 at bantamweight. Again, we hope. Knock on wood. As you might have gathered, if you aren't already aware, these are two women with a history not only of difficulty making weight, but a history of weight misses. Aldana has missed the bantamweight limit badly before. Chiasson has struggled to make the bantamweight limit and has actually missed the featherweight limit before. So all bets are off as far as like what happens on the scale on Friday. As of right now, Aldana is a moderate favorite. She's minus 190, Chiasson plus 160 or so. Keith, I'll throw in a little bit of trivia for the listeners here. Again, part of why you listen is so you can be the smartest person in the room. This may not be the first UFC card to feature 3 winners of The Ultimate Fighter in Macy Chiasson, Tony Ferguson, and Nate Diaz, but it is absolutely the first one to feature 3 tough winners competing outside of the division at which they won the show.
There you go. That's a Jay Petrie special right there.
It is. I put that one on his radar to check into. And now, of course, Macy Chiasson is going to ruin this by turning it into a featherweight fight. Yeah. My whole trivia will be gone. Keith, assuming both women make weight, whom do you like in this one? And for two women that, again, anybody winning fights at bantamweight could step up and challenge for the featherweight title with like one win, and these are two of the bigger women in the division. If you have any insight as to what the hell they're doing,
Yeah, I don't know. So first of all, I want to apologize. While you were doing your intro, you could probably saw me off camera talking to somebody. My 7-year-old son got up. I think he was sleepwalking. he was mumbling and everything, and he was trying to go downstairs to like play video games and stuff. Like it's almost midnight here, so I don't let my 7-year-old stay up to midnight on a school night, or ever.
Yeah.
But especially this. But yeah, he was just mumbling. He still made more sense than like Nick Diaz's last interview. But
hey yo,
timely. That's a timely joke. I feel you asked me. Who's gonna win this fight? I don't know, man. Irene Aldana she's definitely a boxer. She's a high guard defense. She's a pressure fighter. She just kind of keeps taking her ground, moving forward. Though she needs to kind of learn how to cut off the cage a little bit. I think that'd make her more effective. That's why she was really struggling chasing around Holly Holm around the cage. She fights behind a high guard defense. She throws a lot of straight shots, good accuracy. She can be low output sometimes, which is a little concerning. Or I shouldn't say low output, but like single strikes, which I don't like. Her best strike is her left hook. She's got a good kicking game, like a long range outside kicking game. She has some defensive holes. She lacks head movement. She backs straight up. And she's a weak defensive wrestler. I mean, she was taken down 5 times by Holly Holm. She really struggled to get off on the bottom. Holly Holm mounted her. But she does have 3 submission wins, and she looked better against Ketlen Vieira in the last fight. So, because she looked really bad against Holly Holm. Macy Chiasson, man, she's also a massive bantamweight, long and lengthy. It's gonna be the first time that Irene Aldana is gonna have not have that big advantage, being the longer, rangier fighter. She's got decent pop. She has some she has some pop, but she's still pretty raw in the feet. Like she's like that. Her striking has not really developed. She hates being pressured. She lacks head movement. I mean, go back to like the Shayna Young fight. Shayna Young was having success on her feet, which was really surprising. But when she's never learned how to be an outside striker. But when she uses that, what I like to call the Tim Means long man's inside game, she's pretty dangerous. She's got a strong clinch game, nice dirty boxing, knees and elbows inside, which is big, became a part of her game. She also just likes to use her size and lean and drape over her foe and force them to carry their weight. She used to be a pretty weak defensive wrestler, but she showed improvement against Raquel Pennant and Norma Dumont. Now, you mentioned her looking bad against Raquel Pennant. Yeah, she got caught. She was she looked like she almost broke for a moment. But suddenly she's a good wrestler. Like she got 6 takedowns against Norma Dumont and even got Pennington down in a fight that she didn't look good in. So as far as prediction goes, man, I'm really torn. If you ask me after the Raquel Pennington fight, I'd be like, yeah, Chiasson, she's a bust. It is what it is. She's a bust. Give me Irene Aldana. But Aldana's always been somebody that I've never been that high on, which I don't know why, because she's a good striker. But to me, it comes down to where this fight takes place, the range. Both are strong at their opponent's weakness. If Aldana can keep her range, she could smoke Chiasson. Like I could see her getting a TKO. If one fighter completely blows another fighter out, it's Aldana destroying Chiasson. But if Chiasson can get in her range, make it a grimy fight where she can land, say, takedowns in the second and third round or first and second round and kind of win 2 rounds and make it a really close fight. I'm on the fence. I liked Chiasson coming off tough. I really did. I saw some good things, but she never really seemed to live up to her raw potential. We've seen some of that in our last fight. And again, I saying, was that Chiasson finally turning the corner? Or was that what we talked about earlier, as in Norma Dumont just wasn't herself? I'm really on the fence, but I backed Chiasson on tough. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to take Chiasson. She's how much of an underdog is she right now?
She is plus 160 or so.
Oh, I honestly I thought she could be much bigger underdog. I thought she'd be like plus almost 300. So I thought I was kind of being bold, but yeah, I take just Chiasson in a really grimy, close back and forth, highly debated split decision.
Awesome. Well, I should just move on to the next fight now because you stole all the things I was going to say. Comparing Chiasson to Tim Means is one of them. Like, just a fighter that you would think could be a master of outfighting and just prefers to turn themselves into a dangerous person in the clinch. She is, I mean, obviously she doesn't always make weight, but she's the biggest bantamweight in the division. Kind of like Johnny Walker ends the conversation over who's really the biggest guy in this division. I've been face to face with Macy Chiasson several times. Like every Texas card, she's either fighting on it or she's there because there's always Fortis people there. I've been face to face with her. She's a good 2 inches taller than I am. Like, I'm 5'9". She's not skinny. She got fairly broad shoulders. She has muscle on her frame. She's the Megan Anderson of bantamweight. There's just no question who's the biggest person in this division, and she uses it just like Tim Means does. Like, she tends to be taller in the clinch and uses that well for leverage. It makes it real easy for her to get her knees up to your floating ribs and your solar plexus. She's bullied some good UFC fighters in the clinch. It's kind of surprising that that's where Lena Landsberg beat her, but that's 3 years ago. And while she hasn't changed as a fighter since then, her individual tools have sharpened a bit. She's 31 at this point and still only has 10 career fights. So she has this combination feeling of still feeling like a prospect, but at the same time kind of running out of time. It's go time if she's going to become a contender. Obviously, the door's open at 145 anytime she wants it. If she blows weight here, maybe the UFC forces her hand. But I'm with you. I think Macy Chiasson has gotten incrementally better over the last 3 years. I have no such faith about Irene Aldana. She has the same tools she did 5 years ago. And since then, she's gone from, she's past 30, she's 34 now, and she's turned into a once-a-year fighter who's become kind of injury-prone. That's not the kind of person who's getting better from fight to fight. So I'm with you. I understand that Aldana could outstrike her badly if this fight takes place at Aldana's preferred range, but I do at least trust Macy Chiasson not to willingly let that happen. I think Chiasson crowds her. I think she uses kicks, and feints, and eventually just charges to get into range, shoves her to the fence, and that's where most of this fight takes place. If she's able to take her down completely, it might actually get ugly. But if it just becomes a grimy clinch battle, Chiasson's just going to win a grueling fight where she's kneeing her in the ribs, stomping on her feet, dropping to her waist for a takedown and taking 30 seconds and nothing happens. But again, it's 30 more seconds of her just ramming Aldana into the cage. So yeah, give me Macy Chiasson in an ugly decision. But again, if she starts getting her down on the ground in the first round, maybe it turns into an ugly TKO. Third from the top at UFC 279 is a welterweight matchup between Kevin, the Trailblazer Holland, and Daniel, D-Rod Rodriguez. Holland, the 29-year-old Texas native, is 23-7 with one no contest. Overall, he's 10-4 with one no contest since joining the UFC out of the second season of Dana White's Contender Series. Notably, he is 2-0 since dropping from middleweight to welterweight at the beginning of this year. He departed the middleweight division on a 3-bout winless streak, those coming against contenders Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori, and a no contest against fringe contender Kyle Dawkins. He then dropped to 170, where he has racked up back-to-back stoppage wins over Alex Oliveira and Tim Means. The most recent of those, the Means fight, was a second-round Darce choke submission at UFC on ESPN, Cater versus Emmett. He will look to make it 3 in a row against Rodriguez. The 35-year-old from Southern California is 16-2 overall. He is 6-1 since joining the UFC as a graduate of the third season of Dana White's Contender Series. He is on a 3-fight win streak. His lone UFC loss was a unanimous decision against Nicholas Dalby at UFC 255 all the way back in November of 2020. Since then, he has wins over Mike Perry, Preston Parsons, and Kevin Lee. The most recent of those, the Lee win, was a unanimous decision last August at UFC on ESPN, Barboza versus Chikadze. Holland is a pretty comfortable favorite here. He's minus 220. Rodriguez plus 180 on the comeback. Keith, Daniel Rodriguez's UFC run has pretty much been a smooth drive with one big speed bump in the middle of it. Kevin Holland has been more of a roller coaster ride. He was just another dude for the first year or so after joining the UFC. Then he burst onto the scene as the breakthrough fighter of 2020, the first year of COVID, establishing himself as a star and as a middleweight contender. Then it all came to a crashing halt against, once he hit the actual top 10 against guys like Brunson and Vettori. And it was tempting to think, okay, the fun is over. He's going to go back to being just another guy. But if he wins his third straight at 170 and he has that kind of cachet from being a former contender in his last division, he could be like sneaky close to the title picture in this division. Did he get it done against Rodriguez?
So I'll say this before I give my prediction. So you asked before we started breaking down the individual fights what I scored this card, and I scored it a D. If this fight wasn't on, I would score it an F. Like this is my favorite fight in the card. This is a dope fight. The winner of this matchup is definitely, I think, would make a strong argument to be in the Sherdog rankings, top 15 in the world. Kevin Holland went from being a massively undersized middleweight to like a pretty damn big welterweight, which is obviously a strength of his. Long arms, long legs. He's a great athlete, very elusive. He moves well. He isn't very technically sound. He throws his strikes from his hips and stuff, but he does have good speed. He has good hand speed. He's pretty accurate. He's got a nice stiff jab. He showed in his welterweight debut that he's got some good power in the division. He can work from the outside with long, rangy strikes, quick high kick. But then he can also get and use his height inside. He likes to crash into the pocket, land some hard shots. I've said this before, but I keep continuing. He covers distance so quick due to his length. It's like one step and he's halfway across the cage. He uses his size well inside the clinch. He's one of the few guys that when he's in the clinch, he actually likes boxing up the ears, like palm striking the ears, which hurts extremely bad if you get hit there. It's like the best thing you can do when you're getting clinched.
Let me interject.
Good.
When was the last time we saw somebody in the clinch with Tim Means and like towering over him? Like we were just talking about Tim Means' clinch game.
Oh yeah, nobody. Yeah. He hits knees in the clinch so easily. You were talking about Macy Chiasson, how she can just get up to the ribs so easy like that. Same thing with Kevin Holland. He will sneak in a takedown, but he definitely isn't a wrestler. He's actually a pro defensive wrestler, especially when he was at middleweight. Now a lot of things I held against Kevin Lee at middleweight, I'm not going to use it against him at welterweight. Like his inability to struggle to get up on the bottom. We haven't seen that at welterweight yet. So I'm kind of ignoring that. He has a submission threat, and I love that he caught Tim Means in a beautiful Darce choke. So like he looks way better at welterweight. Should have been in the division he should have been fighting with all along. Now, Daniel Rodriguez, he's looked good so far. A really good striker, really good boxer. Southpaw. He's a pressure fighter. Clean boxing, quick hands, one of the best jabs in the game. His left hook is a sniper. I mean, his left hook killed Tim Means. His left hook killed Preston Parsons. He hits really hard. He's willing to throw down in the pocket with pretty much anybody because he trusts that he's going to land the hardest shot. He'll sneak in a takedown every once in a while just to kind of keep his opponents guessing. He has solid takedown defense. He's got 3 subs on his record, and he caught Tim Means in a submission, which is really impressive. So I went back and forth on those. This is one of the biggest tests for both of these guys. Obviously, when I'm talking about Holland, I'm talking about in the welterweight division. Obviously, he's had Derek Brunson and Marvin Vettori. He's obviously fought some big names, but you asked like, could Holland be a contender? I think both guys who wins this fight is a contender. So I'm on the fence. I'm going to go with Rodriguez. It's a back and forth fight. I think it's going to be some really fun, but he's more technically sound. And I think even though Holland showed he's got power, I still Rodriguez, I think, is just a cleaner striker. And I think he has more power. So I think we have an absolute war, but give me Rodriguez by split decision. And this is my pick for fight of the night.
Dude,
That's another upset pick.
It is.
We're doing a lot of upset picks.
We're both sitting at 5 upset picks so far. Of 11 fights we've talked about. I mean, we're at almost 50% upsets. I said that right off the top. Like, dude, I ended up picking a lot of upsets, and not because I felt like I'm going out on a limb with some like wild insider tip. Just like some of the lines seem out of whack. This is one of them, man. Because I understand why Holland is the favorite. He has fought a higher level of competition. The things that formed his ceiling at 185 don't figure to be a problem at 170. I mean, he just ran into two much more physically strong guys that were willing to use that to bully him.
Not even just that, but like two of the biggest physical guys at middleweight. Like he didn't go against Robert Whittaker.
Exactly.
Who's a better fighter than those guys, but he's not big. Like Marvin Vettori's huge.
Yes.
Derek Brunson's huge.
And a good wrestler. So, yeah. But
both of them, yeah.
And on top of it, all of everything else, this isn't Holland's first fight at welterweight. It's his third. He's proven that he can make the cut with no problem.
Absolutely. Looks great in both of his debuts.
Great. But my problem is Holland keeps winning fights. I mean, he's 10-4 in the UFC, but he doesn't have they aren't systematic wins. It's like he almost just like improvises something cool in having these things. He's catching Tim Means, a
little Tony Ferguson in him a little bit, like prime Tony, a little bit of that, a little bit of that going.
I love that you mentioned that because you jumped right on something I'm going to say about Tony Ferguson when we get to the next fight. Obviously the all-time highlight is the knockout of Jacare from the seat of his pants, but slammed Charlie Ontiveros, into a submission just because, hey, he realized for the first time ever, I'm actually the bigger and stronger guy at 185. I'm going to throw this future lightweight. It's just, it's all creative and reactive. And you're right. Like Rodriguez is probably a more technical fighter in every department. Like he's probably a more technical grappler. He's definitely a more technical striker. Like if somebody just wins a straightforward decision here, it's definitely going to be Rodriguez. So
I agree.
Holland, I'm picking Holland to just, again, capture lightning in a bottle somehow. And I am picking that. Rodriguez has never been finished. I'm hesitant to pick something to happen that I've not seen before. And really, he's not even been in big trouble in any of his fights. And that includes against some hard-hitting people like Mike Perry, Kevin Lee. But I'm going to say that Holland does enough work, like finds enough legitimate, surprising submission attempts or stings him with some of his like just off-kilter strikes enough to win 2 out of 3 rounds here. I agree with you that this is the odds-on favorite for fight of the night, and I'm not comfortable with this pick at all. If I were an actual betting man, I wouldn't touch this at minus 220, but give me Holland by decision here. And
I look forward to who we're going to match the winner up with on the recap show.
Considering that, again, there are 8 welterweights fighting on this card, unless you think someone needs to be vaulted into the title picture, you can probably find their next opponent on the card.
Yeah, good.
The co-main event of UFC 279 is a welterweight matchup between Lingliang and Tony Ferguson. The former interim champ and longtime lightweight contender will be making the step up to 170 in the UFC for the first time. Li, the 34-year-old from China, is 19-7 overall. He is 11-5 in the UFC. He has alternated wins and losses over the last 2 years or so. Lost to Neil Magny, a win over Santiago Ponzinibbio, a lost to Khamzat Chimaev last October at UFC 267, and most recently, a second-round TKO of Muslim Salikov at UFC on ABC Ortega versus Rodriguez back in July. He will attempt to get out of that rut of alternating wins and losses against Ferguson. El Kukui, 38-year-old from Southern California, is 25-7 overall. He is 15-5 since joining the UFC as the lightweight winner of the 13th season of The Ultimate Fighter. While he had of course, a famous and frankly remarkable 12-fight win streak from 2013 to 2020. He is currently on a 4-fight losing streak. Those 4 losses, in his defense, came against the best of the best of the best that division has to offer in Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, and Michael Chandler. After those 4 straight losses, Ferguson apparently decided his best possible future lay at 170. He is moving up there, and waiting for him will be Lee. Odds do not favor him to get it done. Lee is currently a minus 270 favorite. Ferguson plus 225 on the comeback. Keith, in starting to put together my scouting report on Tony Ferguson, I mean, I hadn't done serious tape study for him ever since we started doing these previews, like 2 years ago. Just he's been a known quantity for that time. I mean, the first time we ever covered one of his fights, you know, he was on a 12-fight winning streak in the UFC. Like, he's a known quantity to me. I actually went back and watched a pile of his fights, like both the ones on this current losing streak as well as some of the ones on the way up. The fights that he was having in between where the Khabib matchup failed to happen over and over again from 2016 to 2019. He is still just... He is a remarkable martial artist and a really unique skill set. It's rare that you find a fighter with as kind of weird and idiosyncratic a set of skills as Tony Ferguson's perform at such a high level for so long. Like, you think of other kind of weird fight style fighters, you know, your Michel Pereira's, your Keith Jardines, your whatever. They don't typically stay in the title picture of a competitive division for like 5 years straight. Yeah. But Tony Ferguson, it's like somebody drew a bunch of skills out of a hat and said, throw these together and make a fighter, and make him one of the 10 top pound for pound fighters in the world for a couple of years. Ferguson, he isn't built like a wrestler, but he is a wrestler, and everything kind of works and starts from there. He has maybe the greatest example of any current UFC fighter of the tall man's wrestling game. Like, doesn't like to shoot from outside, doesn't really like to clinch in the conventional sense. What he wants is a single collar tie and an ankle pick on the other leg. And the reason, or like a snap down, like, you know, a college.
Yeah.
And the reason he likes that is because his submission game works off the front headlock.
Sure.
You know,
yeah.
He goes back and forth, but, you know, he's constantly at least first or second in all-time Darce choke submissions in UFC history. He's got the long arms that just make that a natural for him. Striking wise, he is an all 8-point striker. Like, he sets up looking like a boxer, you know, hands maybe a little low, but what he really wants to hit you with is his elbows and knees.
Yeah.
His elbows are famously sharp and damaging. There were, you know, obviously there were memes for years going around on you know, like Twitter and Instagram, like, this is what Tony Ferguson's last 8 opponents looked like after fighting him, and they've been run over by like a combine harvester. But what made all of that run for him is that he always had the better cardio than his opponents, and was willing to push a pace that weaponized that cardio, and he always had the better chin than his opponent, because even at his absolute best, all of his opponents hit him and rung him up cleanly. Even guys that he was way better than. Like, by the time he fought
Lando Venata.
Lando Venata. Lando Venata has carved a 7 or 8 year UFC career out of hurting Tony Ferguson. Like,
one moment.
Like, his best win in the UFC is about 60 seconds of the Tony Ferguson win.
Yeah.
Anthony Pettis was like practically a dead man walking by the time he and Ferguson fought, and Pettis hurt Ferguson in the first round. Like, Cerrone hurt Ferguson, and Cerrone was a ghost of himself. Like, everyone that fights Ferguson hits him cleanly, so he always knew that he needed to outlast them. It's always been a war of attrition. You don't see many like first round knockouts on his, you know, resume. It's always him just outlasting and then starting to run downhill on people. Then he starts busting them up. Then he hurts him, grabs the front headlock. We have a Bravo choke, or like jumps on a desperation shot from a guy he's really, really just breaking down. That's what he's lost over these last 4 fights. We just saw Justin Gaethje outlasted him and knocked him out. Beneil Dariush like bullied him on the ground.
Oh,
and Ferguson just Ferguson looked tired and worn out and hurt in the way that Ferguson normally makes other people look. Like, I've said a few times that there was a turning point when other people started doing to Rafael dos Anjos what Rafael dos Anjos used to do to people. That's what's happened to Ferguson. And Chandler, still arguably our knockout of the year. That's Tony Ferguson losing just a little bit of a step because, it was a beautiful kick. Like, so hard to hit a moving target with that front kick, but Tony Ferguson's less of a moving target than he was 5 years ago. And
Someone made a video and it says if Michael Chandler fought against Tony Ferguson in his prime, and someone who has some incredible editing skills, it was Michael Chandler landing that kick and then Tony Ferguson falling back, but then he like spins and he's back up and like Chandler's chasing him.
Yeah.
That's what would have happened.
Yeah, I have every confidence that if they fought, 4 or 5 years ago, which still would have been Chandler's prime and would have been Ferguson's absolute prime, that kick either doesn't land or Ferguson gets knocked down, shakes it off, and he's back in the fight 30 seconds later. Yeah. That's just not him anymore. Some of those problems can be fixed by moving up to 170. He's had a famously brutal weight cut for years, so his chin should be a little better. His gas tank should be a little better. The speed that he's lost from his top gear will stand out less against 170 pounders. And as matchups for a guy trying to do that go, Lingliang is about as good as you can get. It would be insulting to have him fight someone like Darian Weeks or Johan Lainesse that are opening up this card.
Of course.
It would be an admission that Tony Ferguson is done.
Yeah, of course.
This is an actual chance to prove that, hey, I have a little bit of a run left in me in this new division. And Lee is an endlessly tough guy who, it's dumb of me to say this about a guy whose last 4 UFC wins have all been by knockout or TKO, but he doesn't have some of the one-shot weapons that some of the other guys that they could have matched him up against do. All that having been said, I think this matchup still favors Lee. Like, Ferguson's usual style of attrition and weaponized pace and damage and breaking his opponent, I just don't think it's going to work on Lee. Lee's got a good gas tank. He's got a good chin. He's a good defensive wrestler against people not named Khamzat Chimaev. I think Lee just hangs on. Like, maybe he has some scary moments in the kind of in the middle of the fight, like the second round. But I think by the end of the fight, he's going to be rolling downhill and Ferguson's going to look kind of discouraged and beat up. And I don't think Ferguson will have banked away, maybe even not a single round, but certainly not 2. So give me Lee by decision in a fight that kind of is the worst of all worlds, because it will convince Ferguson that he can continue going on and, doesn't dissuade him from that. And we're just kind of stuck. And maybe, he's the kind of guy that has to be shown the door after losing like 6 or 7 straight.
Yeah, this is it's such a weird matchup. That's the thing that first stands out to me, because I don't get what the UFC is trying to do. Now, I agree with what you're saying. Like, you can't have him fighting Darian Weeks. You have to show something. But are they giving him Lingliang because they think he's going to win? And this is like a good enough test where it's not insulting, but it's good enough to get him bounce back? Or are they trying to use Ferguson to get over Lee because of the Chinese connection? I'm like there's still, Lee's coming off a win, a nice win, but have we moved on from that shit? He's not the guy. So I was looking at the UFC, guys in the division, and there's about 5 or 6 names of other guys. If Tony Ferguson wants to move up to welterweight, that I'm matching up with. Maybe do I go with, hey, Tony Ferguson, regardless of how many wins or losses, he's still a name to so many people, kind of like the guy we have in the main event, Nate Diaz. So why don't I put him against Jorge Masvidal and try? Maybe I get Masvidal over, or I get both of them are struggling. I get one of them back over, or maybe I go, wow, Tony Ferguson is so fun. Let me get over a guy that is wild like him, and we can have one of these dreams, like a guy he has in the card in Kevin Holland. Why not have Danny Rodriguez fight Li Jingliang and have Ferguson fight Holland? Or Michelle Pahea? Yep. Or you go, hey, I'm going to get a contender over who really is missing that name, a young guy who's missing the name, like a Sean Brady gets this fight. Or you go, wow, Nate Diaz is getting served up to Chimaev. Well, who's the other Chimaev in the division? Oh, Rachmanov. Let's serve Ferguson up to him. Like, I don't get, like, what's the benefit of getting Lingliang over if you think it is, unless they want him to say, hey, this is the guy that Ferguson can beat. That maybe that's what they're thinking, but all the other options they're not checking the boxes. I just don't get it. I don't get.
I always have to bring up the possibility, just let Alex Morono get one more on his punch card of like,
yeah, there you go. The Alex Morono. I don't know. I don't get it. Anyways, I'll say this about Ferguson. Like, we all remember the knockout from Chandler, but Ferguson was looking really good against Chandler until suddenly he wasn't. I mean, he was in that rhythm where he's flowing, he's elusive, he's flowing. He had good output. He was being unpredictable. I heard someone say that Tony Ferguson, like, you can't plan for him because Ferguson is going to do something, but he doesn't even know what he's going to do. It's like I played my son in video games. Like, he plays, he's 7 years old. He still whoops my ass. It's not even close. We play Smash Brothers. He play. I don't know. I hit random. My son always picks his guys. I pick random. I go, why? Because they're all standing me because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just hitting the button. And we always play the thing. He beats me about 5 or 6 times in a row, and I finally beat him, and then I stop. That's when I stop. That's everyone knows. I stop when I beat you. Walk out of the chat. Anyways, I hit the buttons. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea what the characters do. I'm just hitting buttons. That's Tony Ferguson. Like, sometimes I get Sonic the Hedgehog, and he does a little spin. Like, that's perfect. That's Tony Ferguson. Like, he's spinning and hitting the guy with a spin. That's Tony Ferguson. So, like, he throws shots from weird angles. But when he wants to just, like, jab, he's got a great jab. Straight right is great. But then then he starts getting his rhythm, he starts flowing. He's going to toss out a spinning attack. He showed recently he still hurt Justin Gaethje in the fight. But as you mentioned, even in his prime as one of the best pound fighters in the world, I was still worried about this guy's long-term run. He's so hittable. He's constantly keeping his hands down. You mentioned it. It's a big reason it actually opens up his elbows. Yeah, right. But it might open up your offense, but it hurts your defense. I mean, he's famous for throwing a teep kick. Like, I'm going to throw this teep kick, and I know you're going to time me with a right hand because I'm going to throw with my hands that have no defense, but I'm willing to eat this right hand just to land this teep kick. He keeps his chin high in the air. He never check leg kicks. You go back to, like, the Gaethje fight and the Charles Oliveira fight. Both of those guys were having field day on his legs. You talk about his grappling. Yeah, he has an NCAA background, but he's not a good, like, he doesn't have good takedowns. He's more of a just, like, let's have funky scrambles and maybe I'll catch a transition, catch something while we're all rolling around. You mentioned the front headlock series, or that's the dart strokes and all that. And you mentioned his elbows, slicing elbows while we're rolling. I'll hit you with an elbow. Yeah, his defensive wrestling has been gone for pretty much ever. Like, he's never been a good defensive wrestler. Kevin Lee took him down and mounted him. Kevin Lee was winning the fight before Tony Ferguson came back. Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush made him look like he never put on a pair of wrestling shoes in his life. But the biggest issue I've had, well, there's two big issues. But the biggest issue, and you already talked about it, is he had this legendary durability where he could get hurt and then survive and then somehow turn it up on you. And almost like that, like, why won't this guy go away? And then he kind of beats you. That's what he had, and that's gone. And we kind of knew it was coming. All those times we saw Tony Ferguson get hurt and get rocked, we knew eventually, like, this isn't an avenue for success. And the other thing, and you alluded to a little bit, but I want to stress it even more, and I keep bringing this up, and I'm in a very small, but both me and you, we're in a very small group that'll talk about this. Tony Ferguson has some mental issues going on. I mean, you don't have to be a psychologist or medical doctor to realize there's some things mentally wrong with him, and that really bothers me. I every time I see Tony Ferguson fight, I say, should he even be allowed to fight anymore? It just bothers me. So, as far as Lingliang, to me, and I spent so much time on Tony Ferguson, so I kind of want to I'll be a little short on Li Jingliang. He feels like just a B. Like if I was giving her a grade, I'd give him a B across the board, or like a B minus, a C plus. Like he's just okay everywhere. He's a boxer, but he doesn't really jump off the page. He's a counter striker. He has a slip and rip kind of style. He likes to slip and then counter with power shots, what I do like, especially when he's in the pocket. That slip right hand he landed against Muslim Salikov in his last fight was a really nice thing. He has good power. I think I'm a little higher on his power than you are. I mean, he's got 10 KOs in his career, which is nice. He has some mean leg kicks. I'd say he's a B in his wrestling. Like he's an okay offense, like probably a little underrated wrestler. Oh, I should say B, more like a C, but like he's an underrated wrestler. He's a weak defensive wrestler. Jake Matthews took him down a bunch of times. Neil Magny took him down a bunch of times, but he's got good cardio. Like he's got to go hard. He's a tough dude. So Ferguson could win this fight. He really could. And he needs to if he wants to be relevant at all. I mean, his back is against the wall as it can be because it's no longer losing to A-level fighters. It's no longer using to the top 5 or 7 guys in the division. Now you're losing to the top 30-ish range guys. If he sticks and moves, he jabs and moves, I can see him beating Li Jingliang with just a jab. However, I don't trust all the stuff that's going around with him. I don't trust his mental makeup. I don't trust his chin. I think Li Jingliang softens up with leg kicks. I think Ferguson overextends, which he's done even in his prime. I think he overextends on a shot or throws a strike without setting up any, counter to it, any counter defense to it. I think he walks right into a perfect place thing. I think Li Jingliang's got to starch him. I say, give me Li Jingliang by second round TKO.
All right.
I'm not hoping that happens. Just so nothing against Li Jingliang. Like I don't have anything against him. I don't want to see Tony Ferguson get knocked out again.
That brings us to the main event of UFC 279, a welterweight matchup between Khamzat Chimaev and Nate Diaz. Chimaev, the 28-year-old Chechen by way of Sweden, is a perfect 11-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. He is a perfect 5-0 in the UFC. He is 3-0 at welterweight within that time. He is coming in off of 2 wins in the last calendar year. The first of those, a first-round technical submission of Li Jingliang last October at UFC 267, and then he came back at UFC 273 this April and took a hard-fought but clear unanimous decision over Gilbert Burns. He will look to make it 12-0 and perhaps cement himself as a title challenger in the welterweight division against Diaz. The 37-year-old from Northern California is 20-13 overall. He is 15-11 since joining the UFC all the way back in 2006 as the lightweight winner of The Ultimate Fighter Season 5. He is a former lightweight title challenger. He is, however, on a streak of 3 losses in his last 4 fights, going all the way back to his majority decision loss to Conor McGregor in their rematch 6 years ago. Within a reasonable amount of time in the past, he is 1-2 with a win over Anthony Pettis, a loss to Jorge Masvidal in the so-called BMF title fight in November of 2019, and a unanimous decision loss to Leon Edwards last June at UFC 263, where a fairly lopsided decision was well in the cards when Diaz stunned and, hurt Edwards, but failed to capitalize and ended up losing the decision anyway. Odds, if you listen to the intro, you already know what I'm about to say. I will have to check this to be absolutely sure, but I'm pretty confident in saying that this is the widest odds gap that we've ever seen in a UFC main event that is neither a title fight nor a short notice matchup. Because title fight, the UFC's forced to make the best matchup it can. Same for short notice. Here, it intentionally made this fight months in advance, and Chimaev is minus 1,600, and that's the median. He is literally minus 5,000 at one reputable outlet right now. The best you could get him is around minus 1,350, minus 1,375, but those are less well-known outlets that, frankly, will probably try to shut you down if you try to bet any substantial amount at that rate. Diaz is out there plus 850, plus 900.
I just imagine someone from the PFL going, so you're telling me it's pretty much a pick'em.
Yeah. Yeah. Can that person fight Kayla Harrison? Keith, I'm going to throw this to you first.
Okay.
Obviously, we've been kind of chuckling and talking around this point, so I'm going to throw you kind of a curveball on how to talk about this. Start by telling me, if we wake up on Sunday morning and the headlines on SureDog and every other site say Diaz shocks the world, how does he win?
Hold on a second. What do you mean other sites?
I hear there are some.
Okay, because I would never check the news on another site. I'm a company man.
Yeah. If we wake up on Sunday and the headlines all say Diaz shocks the world, how does he win this fight? Like, what's it look like?
Oh, how he wins? I think you meant make it to the second round. But shocks the world. No.
And then obviously give me
all right. Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. How Nate Diaz wins. All right, so I want to do. I'll give you how a Nate Diaz prediction goes. Then I'll go back and talk about the fighters, and then I'll give my prediction. Okay. Nate Diaz wins by being insanely durable, where Chimaev tees off on him, takes him to the ground, beats him up, and then every minute that goes by, Diaz makes him work a little bit more. I'm working back to my feet. Now, the second time you take me down, it's a little harder to take me down. Oh, you're teeing off my feet, but I keep moving forward, eating your shots while your power doesn't hurt me. Oh, I'm spitting blood at you. Oh, I'm slapping you. Oh, I'm getting the crowd on my side. And you're just continuing to try to tee off and land harder shots. And eventually he starts to slow down and Diaz picks up the pace, maybe lands a shot. Maybe Chimaev throws a desperation takedown, gets caught in a guillotine, gets caught in a triangle, something like that. That's how he wins.
If he does that, I mean, if he does that, for one thing, you're a genius and you're Nostradamus. But if he does that,
I didn't say I'd predict that.
No, me either. But if something like that happens, I bet Chimaev immediately moves up to 185 and never comes back. Now, go ahead and give me your breakdown.
Yeah, how he wins, it looks like similar to the first Conor fight, where Conor's teeing off on him, and then Nate's still in his face, and like, oh shit. Yeah, that's how it happens. So I just talked about the Tony Ferguson fight against Lingliang, saying it makes no sense. I was the one pumping Diaz versus Chimaev forever, which is weird, being that I'm recording a plus 2 hours show. I mean, it doesn't get as hardcore as me and you are. I mean, I really believe this is the most in-depth breakdowns there are out there. If we're not the most in-depth, we're right up there. But the reason why I said this is the ultimate thing is Nate Diaz is way more valuable to the casuals than he is to the hardcores. You, me, we're watching. Marcel Dorf's watching. Caposa's watching. Like, you have us. Diaz is for the casuals. This is the perfect fight to make. This fight, it will do good. And you let him go out to the pastures, and you make Chimaev, who has the personality, the fighting, the everything, you make him a star if he wins. If Diaz wins and you don't re-sign him, though, who knows? And I don't know if he's getting re-signed. Diaz is a boxer. He is a boxer that has really not that much power, if that. So I know someone's gonna be like, "Oh my God, what are you talking about? He almost knocked out the current champion, Leon Edwards, in the 5th round." Like, yeah, he landed a out of character shot at the right time, and I don't think Edwards was as hurt as people think he was. I mean, he was hurt, but it wasn't close to being stopped. The way Diaz beats guys is he beats them with volume and pressure. He likes to march down his foes with his high guard offense, throwing most of his strikes at about 75 to 80% power, and then he unloads his power at just brief moments. His hooks are his best strike, especially his left hook. He uses a lot of hand fighting to kind of keep his opponent in range, but also kind of distract, so that he can kind of wrap around shots around the defenses. Kicks are pretty much non-existent. He just doesn't throw kicks. He's he's always been open to body shots because he has not only does he have a high guard defense, he has like exaggerated to keep the hands up way high, trying to do this, blocking with the elbows kind of thing. Leaves himself open to rib shots. He's got legendary scar tissue, both him and his brother, so they cut very easily. So you expect him to be bloodied. He's always been open to leg kicks because the heavy boxing style. I mean, Conor McGregor was having successful leg kicks. He's decent in the clinch. He likes trip takedowns from the clinch. Also, though, he has that like classic body lock that he got McGregor down with. But he's a weak offensive wrestler in general, especially from the outside. He doesn't really have shots and entries. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He plays BJJ and really struggles to get up. And it's going to really piss off Diaz fans. I think his BJJ is grossly overrated. He can take a beating, and I'll give him that. And in fairness, like the third round against Jorge Masvidal, like even though the fight was stopped, he was starting to pick up the pace a little bit. And yeah, he was picking up the pace in the fifth round against Edwards. Like he has that. He's got some toughness. Now, move on to Chimaev. I can't believe, and I've seen people saying this on Twitter and this and that, going back to his fight against Burns and going into this fight. I can't believe some people are looking at Chimaev because of the Burns fight and like looking down on him. Like, what? Yeah, he showed that he's human. Okay. To me, he showed he's like, yeah, okay, he's human, but it's like a superhuman. People wanted him tested, and he was. He went against one of the best welterweights in the world, and he showed that he was fearless. He walked him right down in the pocket. Yeah, did he get hit sometimes? Did he tire down sometimes? Yeah. Gilbert Burns is a freaking stud. Like one of the like elite of the division. And he still won a pretty I don't want to say lopsided. It wasn't lopsided, but it was convincing. If you won a convincing decision. He went right in the pocket, pressure down, throwing shots down the pipe. He's got big power. He's huge welterweight. I mean, he's built like he's like light heavyweight. He's crazy strong. I mean, he picked up Reese McKee like he was a child. He threw Gilbert Burns. He's an incredible wrestler, blazing fast entries. If he doesn't get you down immediately, he's relentless to keep chaining attacks together and get it to the ground. Great control, has that like Dagestani handcuff style. He's going to hold down one hand, pin it down, advanced position. Has some of the best ground and pound I've seen. He's got a sub game. He's got 4 subs in his career. And I don't know if we've seen everything from this guy. So I said what Diaz has to do. Dude, Nate Diaz is getting like murdered. Obviously, I don't mean that literally, but like he's going to get butchered. Like, I shout out to my buddy Greg, who I talked about the horse trainer in the beginning of the show. The first fight he asked me, "Oh, who you taking, Diaz or Chimaev?" And I'm like, "What?" Like Chimaev's going to murder him, and he's like, "No, Diaz." He's pumping Diaz, and I'm like,
"Oh." I'm glad you mentioned this because you mentioned the casual appeal that Diaz will bring in. The people who kind of jumped onto the Diaz train in the 2 McGregor fights, I think a good portion of them are going to think that Diaz has a good chance in this. Like when you throw the poll on the Sherdog front page saying who wins, Chimaev or Diaz.
It should be 99.
But it's going to end up like 70-30.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think what's going to happen, I think, so this is my final, I'll finish up my prediction. But Chimaev is going to put up a, you know what? You know who the people taking Diaz are the same people who thought Conor McGregor was going to be Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match. Like, Chimaev, I think, is going to butcher him in the first round, bust him open, blood going all over the place, and then put him out of his misery. I think he's going to starch him. I think he's going to I know. Actually, I'm not saying he's starch him. I think he's gonna hurt him, put him on the feet. I think he's gonna follow up some ground and pound. I could see like Diaz pinned against the canvas and getting just battered with shot of shot. So finally, the referee pulls him off. Give me Chimaev in one of the biggest beatdowns of the year.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm with you. It's hard to say never. You know, we're still less than a year removed from Pena versus Nunes, where you and I, again, we were both just kind of like laughing out loud, like Nunes by whatever she wants, first round, at worst second round, and you know, like just that's not how it played out. But it's why I asked you that question off the start, because when we're dealing with somebody that's this big, an underdog, and someone who's this big a favorite, I start by asking myself, okay, if we get the huge upset here, what's the route to get there, and how plausible is it, you know, even as like a flukish, freaky thing. You know, in Pena beating Nunes, like we frankly saw skills that we hadn't seen from Pena before, and some of Nunes's known limitations really extended and pushed to their breaking point. Like, here, Diaz winning here would shock me more than Pena beating Nunes by orders of magnitude. And in, you know, Diaz is someone like Ferguson where I hadn't done serious tape study on him ever since we've been doing this show. One, because he's barely fought since we've been doing the show, but two, because he himself is such a known quantity. Like, he's literally the exact same fighter he was in 2005. Like, nothing has changed. In fact, that's part of the problem. I don't think, like, I understand why you would call his jiu-jitsu overrated. I think of it as, like, 2005 jiu-jitsu that never really evolved. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, the willingness to just spend a whole round on his back, because you can assume that the guy on top of you is like a Marcus Davis or Kurt Pellegrino that's just not, and I feel bad saying that because Kurt Pellegrino's a good grappler, he's a black belt, he runs a gym, but I bet
not all black was equal.
And also, I bet Pellegrino's probably a better grappler than he was in 2007 when they fought. He's probably evolved, but in 2005, if you were a good submission artist, you could go a long way in the UFC by playing guard and waiting for your opponent to make a mistake. He has, you know, old school jiu-jitsu that isn't that effective against modern, well-rounded mixed martial artists. But I went back and watched some of his fights, and all of them I at least relived through like text play-by-play. The fight in Diaz's entire career that makes me sure that he's toast here is his fight against Rory McDonald. Because that's probably the era during which Diaz was his best at welterweight. You know, he'd lost a fight to Dong Yun Kim that I actually thought he should have won, and he'd beaten some decent middle of the road welterweights. That's as good as he ever was at welterweight. And McDonald was just bigger and stronger and a good wrestler and effortlessly slammed him all over the place.
Yeah, that's a good call.
And Diaz is 12 or 13 years older than that. He's not in as good a shape.
Yeah.
The entire division has gotten bigger and stronger, and he's fighting someone in Chimaev that could follow that game plan, probably with one arm literally tied behind his back.
And be bigger than Rory McDonald, and stronger than Rory McDonald, a better wrestler than Rory McDonald, a better athlete than Rory McDonald. And I'm a Rory McDonald guy. Yeah. Hold on real quick. We are behind the scenes as Sherdog voting for welterweight. Right? I was one of the guys pumping Rory McDonald. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And like, but if you just told Chimaev, okay, replicate that performance, just beat Diaz 50-45 or 50-44 just by taking him down 15 times and being in no danger of being submitted at any point during the fight, he could do that with one hand tied behind his back. And then on top of that, he is the apex of another dozen years of evolution in the sport. He is huge. Like you said, the biggest suspense for me about Chimaev is when he's going to decide he's too big for welterweight. And move up to 185, because it's surely coming at some point. But yeah, like I almost feel like Joe Rogan saying, if you built a fighter in a lab, because he has the entire skill set of the Dagestani, I mean Chechen in his case, but right next door. The relentless chain wrestling and just the lockdown top control. Like, he has that entire Khabib Nurmagomedov skill set, but on top of it, he has a type of natural fast twitch like muscle and a level of natural power that none of those other guys have ever had. Like, it's alarming, the kind of like skill set that he brings together.
Let me ask you this. So how much of a favorite is he if he was booked against Leon Edwards instead of Nate Diaz, like the welterweight champion of the world?
minus 400.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 350.
And see, the thing is, I could plot out paths to victory for Leon Edwards against him.
Yeah, of course.
Like Edwards, unlike
he's a champion.
Edwards,
Yeah,
unlike Diaz, Edwards is big. And Edwards is a good wrestler, and he's
a stud. He's the welterweight champion of the world.
Yeah, but he
hasn't lost a fight in like 8 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he still would be a massive underdog.
Yeah, and I you know what, we might find out. But there's no path to victory I see for Diaz here that doesn't involve Chimaev making a terrible mistake, and he's not really made any mistakes.
No,
it's hard to point out where he even could have made a mistake when he's blitzing like non-UFC level guys like Phillips and McKee, or where he's knocking out Mearshart in like 17 seconds. But the Lee fight was long enough that he had to make several like tactical decisions during that fight. He made the right decision at every point. Lee landed no appreciable offense whatsoever. Chimaev didn't even tap him out. He put him to sleep without ever risking losing his position, let alone getting swept. Like, he fought a perfect fight against Lee, and against Burns, a literal world champion grappler with shocking amounts of power and who is himself very fast twitch and explosive. He won 2 rounds out of 3. Burns won a round and, definitely hit him solidly a few times, but he beat Burns like really convincingly, considering it was, a step up into like an actual top 5 opponent. Considering the amount of hype behind Chimaev, it's been a pretty logical progression for him up until now. And now he's taking a step from Burns, like way down to somebody that I think would lose to Lee. I mean, Mearshart's a different division, but like
realistic. If we were ranking welterweights, where would you? How many guys would you rank above Nate Diaz right now?
I mean, there's probably there's about 40 welterweights in the UFC division right now, 40, 50. Diaz is in the bottom 10.
Yeah.
Like,
there's at least 20 guys, no brainer. There's 20 guys, no debate ahead of him.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
No debate.
Easily.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think Chimaev overwhelms Diaz in the first round. Like, I think if Diaz tries to stay on the feet with kind of his like slappy planted boxing, Chimaev isn't one of the guys that's going to take advantage of his lack of checking leg kicks. I think Chimaev is just going to ignore his slappy punches and wade in and hurt him really bad.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Chimaev will get a takedown when he wants, probably about 2 minutes into the round, probably just like step through, take his back standing and launch him with a suplex, just like Rory did. I think I predict like a 10-8 first round where it's arguable that maybe the towel should be thrown.
Yeah.
They're not going to. Diaz is cut up, busted up, discouraged because he's now realized I'm not going to be able to just ride this for 4.5 rounds and get in one great punch, and it's over in the first half of the second round. Chimaev takes Diaz down again, mauls him. Maybe Diaz isn't going to turn his back. Chimaev will be pounding on him. Diaz squirming, trying to control his posture. Chimaev moves out for an arm triangle really fast, taps him out, or puts him to sleep in the second round. Diaz takes his second career submission loss. Yep, that's my call. And
let me ask you this. Sorry, real quick. You said this is you would have it as bigger upset than Pena over Nunes, which I agree. You would have put it on the GSP Sarah, would you? I still have it behind. I have it behind that.
In terms of sheer numbers, it would be the biggest. But I'm talking about how personally shocking.
Yeah, personally, yeah. That's what I.
No, I mean, like Sarah versus GSP is just
people who weren't watching MMA that don't have no idea how big that was.
Like a stocky, stumpy former lightweight who was, by the way, 500 at lightweight, and knocks out the best fighter in the world. Or after winning the title shot off a reality show of not upcoming prospects, of has-beens who he won to get it against Chris Lytle, a fight that was extremely boring, and most people thought Lytle should have won. Yeah. One of those rare like split decisions where it's 2 30-27s and a 27-30.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a referendum on like.
Because I just say the reason I wanted to address this in case Diaz wins, the people already know how he felt about it. Because people say the biggest upset ever, and maybe betting wise, but still not.
I mean, there are ways he could do it that might like push it in the first place.
Okay.
You know, like if he starches them on the feet, I'll be like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't an analyst in 2006, but if you asked me how Sarah beats GSP, I'd be like, well, you know, he is a great
catch him a submission.
Yeah, like GSP gets tired, Sarah takes his back, and he's like this little stocky backpack.
Yeah.
It knocks him out in 30 seconds with like a punch. No, like it would have to be something like that.
Yeah.
But it ain't happening. All right. Anything else on this one?
No.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I want to say something. Actually, I want to say something. If this really is Nate Diaz's last fight in the UFC, like shame on the UFC and Connor's team and Nate's team for never getting that trilogy fight. Like all three of you guys lost massive money by not getting a trilogy fight.
Yeah, just left big money on the table because
you're talking about one of the biggest fights in MMA history. Never happened.
Yeah, and they could have made it at just about any point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they just kind of pissed away the chance to do so. So it's probably going to happen in the boxing ring.
Yeah, no shit.
That has been the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC 279, Chimaev versus Diaz. I have been Sherdog senior editor Ben Duffy. He is Keith Schillen, executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. If this is your first time watching one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. As Keith said earlier, it's not for everybody, but I think we do the deepest dive in the industry. If you want the background, how we got here, the analysis, and the picks and predictions, we're the show for you. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Both Keith and I will get right back at you if you hit us with your own takes on these fights. Certainly any factual corrections. I will get things mixed up from time to time. Happy to take the L there. But most of all, join us on the recap because about 15 minutes after the main event, Keith and I, or sometimes one of us and a special guest, are live on the Sherdog YouTube page where we will break down all 13 of these fights in the reverse order that we just talked about them. We'll start with the main event, work our way all the way down to the first prelim. We'll talk about what was good, what was bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. We'll talk about what's next for some of the notable winners and losers. And most importantly, the live chat is wide open there. It is a large and growing community of hardcore fans like yourself. So we are going back and forth, taking your questions, your comments, and your hot takes in real time. We really enjoy it. It's our favorite part of our jobs here. We're certainly right up there, and we'd love to see you. Between now and then, thanks once again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week, and by all means, yes.
Ben, do you think it's time? Do you want to announce the new podcast right now?
Absolutely. Let's announce it.
The Schillen and Duffy horse racing preview show.
Yes, Schillen and Duffy horse racing.
See you guys.
Galloping to a network near you. Zebras, antelopes, buffaloes will all be included. Whatever they can throw in. The whole zoo will be running.
See you guys.